Welcome to another episode of the Victory Podcast, driven by Audi. I'm your host, Keely Eure, joined by my co-host and former USC quarterback, Cody Kessler. Cody, we're back to break down USC's unfortunate overtime loss to Penn State, and I'm going to use the word that quarterback Miller Moss used to describe it, excruciating. It was an excruciating watch, and I know USC fans are hurting today on Sunday. I'm curious your thoughts, Cody, 24 hours in watching the film back. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Excruciating is 100% correct. I watched it again 2 more times today, and this one probably hurts the most out of the 3 losses this year, and the main reason for that is because we played phenomenal for a huge part of that game. For 95% of that game, we played winning football, and I think we were in the lead or tied or in the lead for, I think, 49 minutes of that football game, right? Penn State kicked that opening field goal, took the lead. We went down and scored after that, and since that point, they didn't have the lead until the game ended. So that's the most frustrating part for me. We played great on both sides of the football. Now, there are some things, and we'll talk about that need to be fixed or things that really hurt us, and I think ultimately lost us a football game, but very small parts of this game that led to that loss. But when you play the number 4 opponent in the country, whether it's at home or away, those little things matter, right? And those can lead to wins or losses. So very frustrating, but overall, I'm proud of the heart that this football team had. I'm so proud of the way that they fought. And I know you don't want to celebrate small things throughout the game if you don't win or it's tougher to, but
Yeah.
we did take a big step forward in some areas on this offense, specifically offensive line, that we needed to. And that's very encouraging. But overall, just very small things ended up leading to the loss, especially at the end of the football game. And I know there's a lot of conversation back and forth about the clock management and the play calling at the end. I have my own take on that, and we'll get into that when we get towards the end of the offensive segment. But and that's what happens in football games like this, right? When the game's so close, when it's a heartbreaking loss, when it goes to overtime, when it comes down to literally the last play on a field goal kick, there's so many things that you can nitpick. But overall, I am very proud of this football team and how they played. Now, it's, like I said, tough to say that when you're 3-3 and you're 1-3 in conference play. And we do need to get better. And I completely understand that. And I'm going to be critical in this episode. But, as a former player and as an alum, I'm very proud of the heart that this football team showed. And the guys on the field that put all that work in throughout the week and practice and off season, they left it all out there. And I was proud to call myself a Trojan after that one, even though we came up short.
Well, obviously, a lot to talk about in this episode. Before we dive into it, just want to give a couple reminders. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you ever want to get your voice heard, be sure to look out for a tweet or a question box on Instagram or Twitter. Our socials are Victory Pod USC. We put them out after every game. Also, this is interesting. I found that people have kind of found this outlet, but I've said before, if you want to send us a text, you can do that via the audio version of this show. If you go to any podcasting app, in the description of each episode, it says send us a text. And people have been doing that at all hours of the day, which is kind of fun just to see people's thoughts and when they come about. But if you don't want to wait for a tweet or anything of that sort, feel free to send us a text and it will make its way into the episode in the questions portion. Alrighty, Cody, let's dive into it. I want to start, as we always do, with USC's offensive performance. And I want to start with the trick play that we saw from USC's offense. I felt like, we've talked about it a lot. Like, where is the quote unquote Lincoln Riley offense and kind of the bravado that we've seen in past seasons? I felt like this was a return to it. It really gave USC and its offense a spark that was needed.
Yeah, and I advocated for that for so long, and it's easier said than done, right? You've got to come up with the plays. You've also got to go out there and execute them. But even on the Trojan Tailgate show before the game, I talked so much about wanting to get back to that, right? Have some 3-play 75-yard drives that take off 1 minute, right? And this one was 1-play 75, which is even better. And it was 15 seconds, of a possession. And then, we went down there and scored, which was great to see. But that was something that was the opposite a year ago too. Remember how many times we scored so fast and there were arguments from the fans or from us or for talking about, hey, slow it down a little bit to help our defense out, to keep them off the field, to allow them to get some rest. But it's been the opposite for me this year. We really have lacked in the explosive play department, but that was so great to see. I love that it was Quentin Joyner too, someone that we wanted to get more touches in the game and someone that fumbled from a week ago to get that confidence back, and a beautifully designed play, right? You had Quentin Joyner all the way outside. Walker Lyons was actually at running back in the backfield on that play. And then you have Zachariah Branch, the playmaker in the slot, hand it off to Quentin. And it was great. He did a little lazy end around. It looked like he was going to settle in the backfield. But then before Penn State can make their calls, we snap the ball, we give it to him, and then we give a fake reverse to Zachariah. And that took, I think, 4 or 5 Penn State defenders with Zachariah on that play. And it's so much more important. That's why play calling is so, crucial for a play to go 10 or to go 75 instead of just 10. when you take 2 or 3 guys out of the play, especially a linebacker second level with a fake reverse with Zachariah, right? There's not an accident. He didn't say, all right, let's just send Zachariah out of the way for window dressing for no reason. There is a reason we're doing this. They're going to key on him. I know he's not having the year he wants to have so far, but he's still a playmaker that you have to account for. So that was a great call by Lincoln Riley to fake it to Zachariah, take some guys out of the way, and then Quentin Joyner did the rest. So we need to see more of that though, and we talked about this team starting fast. That's exactly what they did to start this game. I know the first drive didn't go our way, but 2 of the first 3, the next 2 drives we had, that one was 1 play, 75 yards, 15 seconds. The next drive after that, 7 plays, 89 yards, and that took 3 minutes, right? That's how you start fast. And before you know it, now we're up 14-3. And that's the recipe for success. When we played Michigan, we're down 14-0. When we played Minnesota, we start off, going back and forth a little slow. Wisconsin, we get down at half by 11, right? Those are the way you start a game that don't work to your benefit going into the second half or going throughout the game. We started exactly how we needed to against this Penn State football team. And there's a lot of plays throughout this game, but that one in particular was awesome to see. And I was glad that Quentin Joyner, got that confidence back and finished in the end zone.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. I know that you've been high on Quentin Joyner and you've said that he's future NFL talent. I feel like we saw him make the most of his carries, but would you want to see him more in that game?
Yeah, I do. And the very next drive, he ended up in the end zone with a touchdown catch as well, right? And that's something for me that I've, been very high on. And I truly believe that too, back to your point. I think Quentin Joyner has NFL talent written all over him. He's going to transition so well to that next level. You can tell by his speed, his size, the way that he can make guys miss, his balance. When there's time guys hit him in the leg and he stays up and continues to keep his momentum going forward. That's just stuff you can't teach, right? He's a pure athlete that can catch it out of the backfield and also can take it the distance. And that play right there, right? We've talked about him maybe being a little bit more of a powerful back or someone that can run downhill. He broke that 75 yards and he outran multiple defenders.
Yeah.
That is high-level stuff from Quentin Joyner. But the biggest thing for me is we just have to get him involved more in this offense, right? And that's exactly what he does when he gets the football. He'll take it 75. He'll, the very next series, he takes it in for a catch. It was a beautifully designed play by Lincoln Riley, but then you get him in the flat, he catches it and has another walk-in touchdown, right? So he touched the ball 5 times and he had 94 yards of our total offense. To only have 5 touches at that point, in my opinion, just can't happen. We have to find ways to get him more involved, but I don't want that to take away from Woody Marks as well, right? I love Woody Marks. I think he is, up to this point in the season, the MVP of this football team on offense. Yeah. He really is. He is do it all. He's done everything. He's even got a forced fumble recovery against Michigan. So yeah. He's doing it on the offensive side, and then he's doing it when he has to go out there and make a play off of a fumble as well. But yeah, it's just, I don't want to take it away from Woody Marks. I don't want to take carries away from Woody Marks, but maybe some of these passes, let's turn them into runs, right? We're running the football so well. Instead of throwing it, 30, 40 times a game, let's run it a couple more. I'm fine with when you have an offense that's moving the ball so well on the ground, when you're having explosive plays on the ground. Now, if we were running for 2 yards of carry and it's like, we're not getting anything going on the ground, we've got to start throwing it all over the field to find some explosive plays. I'm fine with that. But when majority of our explosive plays the last 2 games have come from the ground game, let's lean heavy on that. Let's let it be a 1-2 combo. Let's let it be like they did with Allen and Singleton at Penn State, right? Let's give Woody 5 carries, then give Quentin 3, then give Woody 6 or 7 more because he is the lead back, and then give Quentin 2 or 3 more, right? So it can be or it can be a 70-30 Woody Marks to Quentin Joyner, but right now 5 touches for Woody Marks from what he did in that football game, I think is too low. And I'd love to see him get the football more, especially when he keeps making plays like this. I know he had the fumble a week ago, and we didn't see him the rest of the game after that, but that's something that he learns from, and he learned from it in a great way. He went out there, he had 2 hands on the football in traffic. He finished with the ball in the end zone. He took care of it. Like I said, 5 touches for 95 yards. That's more production than you expect to get from a freshman back. So it was great to see, and I just really hope that he can continue to get some more touches going forward. And I think he deserves to have a bigger role in this offense.
Now, you identified in our preview episode that this Penn State defense was the 4th ranked in the country as far as run defense goes. So I was surprised with the day that USC had on the ground. So overall net rushing, they had 189 yards, which was 7.9 yards per carry. Of course, we mentioned the trick play. So I did the math and took the trick play out of it. That's still 4.95, essentially 5 yards per carry without the trick play. What led to USC having such a great day on the ground?
I think it's 2 things. I think the biggest thing for me was that we started to build that confidence against Minnesota, right? We saw so many explosive plays. And if you watched the Trojan Tailgate, which I hope all of you did that listen to this podcast, but my breakdown on the offensive game plan was talking about when you have an offensive line that's struggling a little bit in pass protection, the best way to build confidence is to get the ground game going because it's so much easier. And I never played offensive line, but I've lived with some, and some of my roommates are offensive linemen, and some of my very close friends are. But as an offensive lineman, it's so much easier to attack the defensive end, to attack the defensive tackle, to attack a linebacker and work downhill than it is to kick step when you have a Abdul Carter coming right at you, right? When you're working backwards and they're full speed bull rushing you with the 3 or 4 yard head start, that's tough. That's why they pay tackles a lot of money in the NFL. That's why offensive linemen are up there sometimes with skill players or a little bit below quarterbacks. Sometimes one of your highest paid players on the team is a left tackle because it is so difficult to pass protect, especially when you're kick stepping and you have TJ Watt and you have Myles Garrett, guys coming at you like that. And let our offensive line be the hammer, instead of the nail. Let them go attack downhill. Let them be physical and take the fight to them. Against Minnesota, we did a great job of pulling around with Elijah Page, with Mason Murphy, guys on the outside that have struggled a little bit in pass protection, but you let them work up to that second level and go downhill and be physical. That's where you start to see that confidence. I think that carried over well in this football game to when we had to pass protect because we took a huge step forward there. And we'll talk about that in a second. But overall, that's the first thing for me is just build confidence from the Minnesota game or build confidence from that football game to say that, hey, or show that we can do it. We can go out there and be a dominant run football team that, hasn't been a huge story with Lincoln Riley's air raid offense, but we're starting to show that with this football team. We also have 2 very good backs that are making our guys right. And that's another thing, too, when it comes to the run game and building confidence. As a quarterback, I hate to use the word sitting duck because there are some athletic quarterbacks. Miller did a good job in this game moving around. But when you sit back there as a quarterback and your offensive line loses on a pass rush, it's a lot tougher to react or get out of it than it is a running back. If maybe you miss on a block or you block them outside and they're supposed to be go in, your running back can make you right. Right. So you don't see as many mistakes in the run game when you have a running back that can work off of your block and make a big play. When you're pass protecting, it's a lot harder to miss. And then your quarterback makes you right on that. Right. Normally it leads to a sack or even worse, a sack fumble. So that was just great to see. And just back to your point, the biggest thing for me was I did not know, and I'll be the first to say it, and we talked about in the preview. I don't want to say I did not know, but I thought it was going to be extremely difficult for us to run the football in this game, right? And you just mentioned they were fourth in all of college football and stopping the run. You asked me, how do we get it going? I said, hopefully build off that confidence, but I don't really know how. You have a team that prides themselves in stopping the run. They had only given up 76 yards per game, which was fourth in college football, but you said they averaged almost 5 yards per carry. They were fourth in college football at only giving up 2.4 yards per rush as a team. That's high level run defense. Yeah. And we exposed that. And we did a great job. And it wasn't like, there's a couple big plays here and there. And it wasn't like you mentioned, that Quentin Joyner just skewed the stats because of that one big run.
I adjusted it.
We ran the ball at will. And that's, I love that. Look at that. Taking it to the next level with the stats here on the Victory Podcast. That's what we do. But we dominated in that category the entire game in an area that I thought we were going to struggle at. And I thought we were going to have to lean heavily on Miller Moss. He was my pick for player of the game, right? For best in the game on the pregame show because I thought we were going to have to throw it all over the field. But no, we had a balanced attack. That's why I say this game just hurts so much because we saw flashes of how good this football team can be. We saw flashes of how balanced and how dominant this offense can be against the number 4 team in the country and one of the best defenses in all of college football, right? And one of the best teams in our conference. So it gives you a lot of confidence going forward, yes, as a fan and as a player and as someone that loves USC football. But again, it's so much more difficult to get excited about that after a loss, right? If we would have won that football game, we'd be having a different podcast right now. But there are positives, and I think it's important to talk about. And I'm glad you brought that up about the run game because that's something that we can build off of going forward. And that's something that we showed the last couple of games, or something we've proved that we can come in here to the Big Ten and we can run the football, and we have 2 good backs and an offensive line that can be dominant on the ground game.
Now, in a different regard, Kyle wanted to know, what did you see different in pass pro? It seemed night and day against better pass rushers.
Good. I'm glad this is a perfect leeway into this is we took and I have to give credit. We have been very critical to our offensive line. We've been very critical to Elijah Page and to Mason Murphy on the outside, rightfully so, right? They have struggled. They have, not done a great job of winning their one-on-ones consistently, right? They've shown flashes, but they haven't been able to consistently produce at the tackle position. They took a ginormous step forward in this football game. Now, yes, if you go back and watch the tape, we used a ton of those wing type positions, right? With a tight end, with a running back, helping out with those chip blockings like we talked about, but that's fine. I am happy with that. And people can argue, oh, you're going to lose someone in the route running. No, you chip and then you get out. You still have a flat element to your pass game. And we used a lot of 50s protection, which is 5-man protection. Let your back and your tight end get out. We used some empty looks. We used different things to where it was 5 guys blocking 4 or 5 guys blocking 5 one-on-ones. And we won a lot of those. We did a great job. Now, I do understand, like I just mentioned, we use a lot of chips, and that's fine. We have to be able to do that. But I was so happy when I watched the tape back. I paused it, I rewound it, I watched it over and over when we had a one-on-one block with Elijah Page and Abdul Carter. Elijah Page is still a very young player. You're asking him to block one of the best defensive ends in all of college football. He did a great job the entire game. Mason Murphy as well, someone who had, and I'll just come out and say it, a very poor performance against Minnesota, right? He gave up that big sack or that tip football that got picked when we were going down to, take the lead and put the game away. That's something that's tough to overcome and to bounce back from, the next week. He did give up one sack on the day, but outside of that, he did a great job of winning on the edge. That's something that's so important to see. Emmanuel Pregnon is playing very high-level football. Go back and watch the tape. Number 70 is just playing phenomenal right now. That makes me very happy to see him doing such a great job. Jonah Monheim, again, one of our best offensive linemen up front. Alani Noah has taken a huge step as well in that regards, but it's when it comes to pass protection, everybody's eyes goes to the outside, right? How can your tackles perform against those great athletes, the defensive ends that Penn State has that other teams have? And I feel like we took a huge step forward. Now, is it perfect? No. There's things that we can keep doing. There's things that we can improve on. There's things that we can get better at, and we can continue to take away some of those chips and lean more on those one-on-one blocks to get more people out in the pass game. But overall, when you hear the argument of, we can't chip all the time, we've got to be able to get guys out, it's going to hurt us when it comes to the pass game. Pass protection is number one priority. That is more important because your quarterback can't throw the football from his back. I would rather prioritize keeping someone in to help for the time being until they prove that they can continue to win one-on-ones before we start sending 5 or 6 or 7, or however many guys you want to send out into the pass game. Well, you can't send more than 5, but sending 5 guys out into the route tree. Outside of that, and outside of the chips, I was very proud of their performance. I think they did a great job. And going back to my former point, I think a big reason for the confidence we had in pass protection is because they started feeling good about themselves in the run game and feeling like, okay, I can be dominant at the college level. I can go out there and be physical. Let's let that confidence transition from run game over to pass protection. And it really did. But a lot of credit to Lincoln Riley, too. He did a great job of protecting those guys, helping them out. And then when they had to win one-on-one, they did a great job all game of winning a majority of those battles.
What did you make of Walker Lyons' performance as well? I thought he's been kind of thrown into the fire since Lake McCree got hurt, but he part of that chipping effort as well.
Yeah, he did a great job. He's for a freshman, and Walker Lyons, for those you don't know, went on a mission, got away from football for a while. That's tough to come right back, and he did do a good job of staying in shape, but come right back and then go out there and you're only your 6th game ever. You're playing against one of the best defenses in college football. He was phenomenal, and Cade Eldridge too is another guy I thought played great when it came to being physical in that football game. Now, were they dominant in the pass game? No, that's fine. Okay, but their job this game was to be physical, to help out and chip on these defensive ends, to come across and be great in run blocking, check, and check. They did all of that. I was so proud of the performance Walker Lyons has. I was a little frustrated with that call he got where he got the chop blocker blocking below the waist on that, and I won't get into the rule there, but it's a 10-2 rule. We talked about it off, before we started recording, or there was one that Penn State, it looked like, got away with, but they just want him to be more head up when you're doing that, when you're coming back across instead of getting fully sideways, right? 10-2, keep your shoulders straight ahead. But again, you can argue it looked like it was more at the rib waist area than it was below. So I thought that was very good. And that's why Lincoln was so upset when you ask a freshman to do those things and he does it and then he gets called for a penalty for it. I would be frustrated too. But overall, yeah, Cade Eldridge and Walker Lyons have done a great job of stepping up specifically in the run game and being physical with Lake McCree out.
Do you feel like Coach Riley abandoned the run game? And the reason I only ask this is because we got a question from No Cheese who said, why does Lincoln abandon the run game and then try to come back to it, he says?
I mean, I wouldn't say abandon. I don't like using the word abandon. I go back to my former point on that is, I'm fine with us being more dominant or being more run heavy when the run game is that dominant, right? And we always talk about a balanced attack, right? And the reason I always say a balanced attack with this offense is because in years past, or when you watch Lincoln Riley's offense, it can tend to get more pass heavy. And you can tend to see them start throwing the football over the field. When you're rolling and your pass protection is great, or you have, quarterbacks that can move around a lot. Miller Moss did a great job moving around this football game, and I'll talk about that. His pocket presence, I thought, was great. Are there times it could have been a little bit better? Sure, but he was a big part of helping out in pass protection too. When you have a quarterback that can step up, that does a great job of getting over and up, working down, that third down on one of those final drives of Deuce Robinson. That was phenomenal high-level football to see the rush, to step back, step forward, and then make a big play to Deuce on third down. So that was great to see. But when you have a quarterback that can just throw it all over the field, and his quarterbacks from the past speak for themselves, right? You have Caleb Williams, you have Baker Mayfield, you have Jalen Hurts, you have Kyler Murray, guys that have won Heisman trophies, guys that have played in high-level games that have done a great job. It's easy to throw the football over the field when you have a quarterback like that. Miller is doing a great job this year. I truly believe that. And we'll talk about a little bit areas I think he can improve on. And we'll be a little critical on him about some things that, I think he can get better at going forward. But overall, it just felt like we weren't as balanced as we could be with the run game. Now I'm starting to lean more so to let's be run heavy, right? Like No Cheese said, I don't think we abandoned it, but I definitely think we could have ran the football more in this football game, especially with the lead that we had. Now coming out in the second half, Penn State did a great job of going back to back drives and tying the game up. But still, even when it's a tie football game, stick with the run. And I think we did a good job of doing that. I really do. And that second to last drive, when there was, I think, 10 minutes and 50 seconds left to go, we went 9 plays and finished in the end zone. 5 of those were run plays, and 4 of them were passes. And one of them was that quick throw to start the drive to Woody Marks, which is basically an extended handoff and get him going. So it was technically 6-3. So, we did a great job of sticking with the run game, even in those got-to-have-it moments. And that was great to see. Now, overall, we threw the ball 34 times and ran it 24. So, No Cheese, I get what you're saying. Maybe if you want to see a little bit more balanced or the run game be at, 40 to 35 in favor of running the football, sure. But I think overall we did a good job of being successful in the run game, and Lincoln Riley stuck with it the entire game.
Now, one of your keys to the game was winning the turnover margin, and USC did that. But what did you make of what USC's offense did once they had that opportunity presented to them?
Yeah, that was a little tough because although we did win the turnover margin, our one turnover came at the worst time that it could have. That was very frustrating. And like I said, we'll get into Miller's performance in a minute. But yeah, that was, for me, that's somewhere that we have to be better, right? In those sudden change situations, the first one we have, right? We get that interception. Great play by Desmond Stevens. That was a high level play. True freshman having to fill in with Eric Gentry out right now. That gives you a lot of confidence too. I'm getting ahead of myself and getting to the defensive side, but that's got to give you a lot of confidence with Matt Ince and Danton Lynn.
Yeah.
When you have a true freshman playing like that, when you have Eric Gentry out. So that was great to see. But then he gives us the football 1st and 10 on the 26. We don't get anything going. 3 and out. We settle for a field goal, right? 3 points, I'll take it. But when you have that type of field position off of that sudden change and that momentum, and I don't want to say it would have been the kill shot that early in the football game, but that would have been a huge thing if we could have went down there and score and make it 21-3 instead of 17-3, right? Just imagine how loud the Coliseum would have been too, how everything would have been. But great job by Lance finishing the field goal, protect the football. I'm fine with that. We'll take 3. But then we have it too. Penn State goes out of the second half. They go huge drive, finish in the end zone, another big drive, finish in the end zone, right? Well, then the third drive coming back, it's tied, and we've gone the last 2 drives. When we had the football, we didn't score. So it's 2020 now. Everyone's starting to get a little worried, and then a huge play by Kamari Ramsey to get the ball, to knock it out, get it tipped up, and then Easton Mascarenas with a huge pick. Give us the football again. 1st and 10 on the 24. Penn State 24 going in, right? Those are huge momentum-changing plays. Now, I think it was very important for that to happen from the defensive standpoint because Penn State had gone 2 drives in a row and finished in the end zone, and they were starting to really get the momentum back, and they could have taken the lead right there. So huge play by our defense, great job. But when you have a 1st and 10 at the 26 on the first turnover and then a 1st and 10 at the 24 on the second turnover, and both of them finish with field goals, it's frustrating. Now, if we're playing Utah State like earlier in the year, if you're playing a lesser opponent, that maybe it's not that much of a close game or it's not the number 4 team in the country, okay, fine. We finished with 3. It's not going to hurt us. But in that type of game, it's so important as an offense. When your defense gives you that field position, you have to reward them. You have to go finish in the end zone. At least one of those 2, in my opinion. We have to find a way to finish in the end zone on those drives when you have a short field. You're starting basically in the red zone on both of those. We have to find a way to get 6 instead of 3. So that was a little frustrating, but overall, great job by our defense getting some turnovers, and our offense did a good job besides that final drive of protecting the football all game long.
Now, you've alluded to Miller Moss's performance, and so I definitely want to get into that. He was 20 of 34 on the day for 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And Cody, I know you look deep into everything that USC does, but especially quarterback because that's what you played at multiple levels. So I'm curious your thoughts after watching back the film.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of Miller. I think he's done a great job, right? He stayed here through the tough times in an era of college football where it's easy to transfer. And he stayed here, and he's the guy for the job. And I truly believe he's been playing some high-level football and played great against LSU. He played great in the bowl game when the guys needed him a year ago. He's had some high-level throws and high-level performances this year. But for me, when you go 3-3 on a football team, and I'm a quarterback before, that's why I'm being a little bit maybe more critical on Miller right now, is because I've done that for myself. And I guarantee you, Miller is looking in the mirror right now and self-reflecting and self-scouting and watching the film back. And I promise you, no one's staying later right now than Miller Moss in the film room, figuring out how to get this fixed and start winning some football games going forward. But when you're 3-3, that record falls on 2 people and 2 people only: the head coach and the starting quarterback. That's why you take more of that pressure on, right? You realize that, although there may be other areas of this team that can improve, everyone's going to look at who your starting quarterback was in those football games, even if you play great. That's just the nature of our job, right? When you play quarterback. But I did go back and watch some of the film from other games. I watched this game multiple times. I think he played well. He did. He's doing a good job. And all three of our losses, I believe he played well enough to win the game. I truly believe that. But he needs to, in my opinion, take that next step and be great in those moments. He's very good right now. He's really good in some of those moments. He just needs to be great. There's times when we have the ball in our hands with the game on the line. And there's a combination between play caller, quarterback, offensive line, receivers, everybody as a unit for everything to go well, right? But there are times, especially in this football game, when it really showed against Penn State, where Miller missed some of these throws that he had to make in this situation, right? And when I go back and watch the film, I think that's what, the point I'm getting at is somewhere that he can improve. And I think he needs to take that next step. And that's hurting him a little bit is his accuracy. He's missed some throws that you have to make in these moments if you want to win these football games, right? If you want and it's a lot of pressure, right? That's the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's the weight of the team on your shoulders. It's the weight of the Coliseum on your shoulders. But if you want to be that guy to win those games, you've got to make those throws, right? And he missed some of those in this game. And I went back a little bit, and looked at some of the stats of how he's played. And I will say this before I get into those numbers, a big part of it, in my opinion, is because of the pressure that he's had on him, right? And I'm not saying the pressure from the outside, although that is true, but I'm saying the pressure from a defense. And Yogi Roth, last game against Minnesota, brought up a stat about him having just over 2 seconds to throw the football, right? That is the worst in college football in time per throw or time to throw before pressure. I don't care who you put back there at quarterback. That is tough to be successful, right? So I think a big part of his accuracy comes from the amount of hits he's taken, the hard hits that he's taken. Some of those, you see him struggling to get up. Those add up. I promise as a quarterback, and Lincoln Riley said, show me a tough quarterback, I'll show you a tough football team. That's true, but you don't want your quarterback taking those hits. So I think that's affected his accuracy. But I went back and looked at it, right? And that's where I think he can take that next step. And someone, myself, that takes a lot of pride in being accurate and putting the football where it needs to be, that's something that helped me a ton. Because for Miller, sometimes I feel like he tries to be too perfect, right? And go back to this game a little bit, the one in overtime. And we'll talk about that when we get to the overtime segment. But in overtime, you had Mekhi Lemon, right? He was at slot, right? We get man-to-man. He runs that stutter route and then runs down the sideline. Did the DB hold him? Was it a penalty? That one was close to me. I think the one against Jacoby was absolutely a penalty that wasn't called, but that one was close to me. That's a little hand fighting, but Mekhi still won, right? And Miller throws it 5 yards out of bounds. You don't even give him a chance to make a play. He wins. You have all the back of the end zone. You have the back pylon. You have, the outside of the field to work. Throws it out of bounds. You have to make that play in overtime. Then you go back a couple times. I feel like he's trying to throw too many back shoulders throws. He's trying to be too perfect. You have a play where Mekhi Lemon wins on the right side of the field, right? When we're going in, gets past the defender. He tries to throw a back shoulder. Everyone threw their hands up for a PI because Mekhi couldn't get back to it. But that ball should have never been there. It was 4 yards behind him on a back shoulder. Throw it over the top. Let it freaking rip, man. Let it go. There's times when you have athletes on the outside that win. Let it go. Let it rip over the top, right? Let Mekhi go get it. You put yourself too much in a confined space in a box when you have to throw a perfect back shoulder every single time. That is a hard throw to make, especially from the opposite hash. Then the next play after that one, you have Zachariah Branch, who struggled a little bit, but he did win on this route. He wins to the outside. He has all this space to work outside of him, and then he tries to throw another back shoulder, and it lands short, right, on back-to-back plays. So, and you hear on the TV copy, the announcer goes, Zachariah's at the 3 and the ball landed at the 4. It just came up short. He couldn't get to it. You have to be able to make those plays in those moments. And then another one, and the one that hurt the most, and we'll talk about this later, but the slant to Deuce Robinson, right? The last pick, the only pick of the game. Other than that, he protected the football, but on that play, and this is why I talked about protection a little bit and getting hit. You can see him, his feet were good. He made the right read. He gets standing there, but then when he started to throw it, you see him start to fall off a little bit, right? When you start to fall off and you fade away, what happens to the football? It sails high, right? You don't keep your shoulders level. That's what happened on that. Is that a product of him getting hit? In my opinion, yes. I've watched a lot of quarterback film, but you can't miss that throw, right? Then your accuracy becomes an issue. It sails on you. They get a pick, and luckily they didn't get to go down and score, but then we lose in overtime when we have a chance to win the football game. So I don't want to sound like I'm being very critical on Miller. I truly believe he's the right guy for the job right now. I think he's playing good enough in these games to win. But overall, just going back and on these stats, and this will kind of back it up and support what I'm saying a little bit, and I'm going to count the Louisville game, right, for his completion percentage. And again, a product of that is taking some of those hits, but in his last 7 games, counting Louisville, in 2023, in that bowl game, he was 70% completion percentage. The first game against LSU, 75% completion percentage. Then against Utah State, 70% completion percentage. And we had multiple drops in that bowl game, so it could have been higher. But since then, it has gone 54% completion percentage, 67% completion percentage, which I'll take. I'll live with that. But then it goes 60% completion percentage and 58% completion percentage. If you want to be that high-level, very good quarterback, it needs to consistently be around 68 to 70% and above, right? That's high level football. That's efficient football. Those are those teams that are great. Those are the teams that win a lot of football games because their quarterback is playing great. That's what you have to do, right? And you look at the wins and losses from this year, and our 3 wins, Miller has gone 67% against Wisconsin, which again, I'll live with that. 70% against Utah, that should have been higher, and then 75% against LSU in completion percentage. Our 3 losses, Miller has been 54% against Michigan with the pick 6, 60% against Minnesota with 2 interceptions, and then this week he was 58% versus Penn State with that interception at the end of regulation, right? And again, I think Miller is doing he's doing a good job. He's doing what he needs to do to win some of these football games. I just want to see him take that next step, and I think that starts with his accuracy. And the final thing I'll say about that is one of the biggest reasons that I had success here at USC, and especially my junior year when I went out and had 39 touchdowns and I think only 4 or 5 interceptions that entire year, was because of the guys around me, right? And I take a lot of pride in saying that I was accurate. I was a good quarterback. I could make all the throws. I could do all that. But I'm also man enough to admit that I had great playmakers around me, right? I didn't have to be perfect all the time because I had Nelson Aguilar and Marquise Lee and Juju Smith-Schuster and Adoree Jackson would come in on offense. And I had Darius Rogers out there that was a surefire catch no matter what. And I got to learn from, Robert Woods. I got to learn from Woody before I started playing. All these great playmakers around me, I didn't have to be perfect. I could let them go make the play. So on some of these back shoulder throws where I feel like Miller is just trying to be too perfect and putting himself in a box and throwing it into a 1-by-1 window, let it rip. Just throw it with some air. Let them go get it. Let Deuce Robinson, who's 6'6", or Jacoby Lane, who's 6'4", 6'5", let them go make the play on the football instead of them having to be a perfect back shoulder. Kyle Ford, a couple times trying to throw him a back shoulder. Just put the ball down there. Makai Lemon can run by guys. Zachariah can. Just let them go get it. And again, I'm being overly critical right now, and I'm nitpicking because I played quarterback, and I know Miller's doing the same exact thing. When you're 3-3, you've got to look inward. You've got to look in the mirror. When you're 1-3 in conference play, things have to change. But my biggest advice to him right now, and one place that I think that he can get better, is just with his accuracy. I think he did a good job of moving around the pocket this game, more so than he has before. And there's been some talk about his mobility. I think he proved this week that, and it helped the offensive line a ton as well, and they played good, but he did a good job of working in the pocket. He's not going to take off and run sideline to sideline like Caleb did or be Houdini and do all that, but he did enough to move around and make some plays with his feet and make some plays on the run. But for me, I just need to see that accuracy, especially in those big-time moments, take that next step.
As far as the perfectionism that you described, how much of that is a result of the pressure he's faced this season and trying to make the most of his opportunities when he does have a clean pocket, when he can make those throws?
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think anybody who watched this football game will agree with me. Our offensive line took a huge step this week in pass protection, especially against Penn State's defensive line, their front 7, how good they are. You have a first-round pick in Abdul Carter, maybe some more up front in that unit. But so that was great to see, right? And we've taken multiple steps forward in the run game the last couple of weeks. But before that, prior to this game, and it's kind of been the story this season, as Miller has been hit a ton. And it's tough because there's times, go back to the Minnesota game when we're driving, it's 3rd and 4. We have a chance to put the game away, and he gets hit because, Mason Murphy gets beat at right tackle, and now it turns into an interception instead of possibly a touchdown throw to Deuce Robinson. You got everything you wanted on that play. You had a one-on-one in the slot to Deuce Robinson with the smaller nickel corner. You had a chance to make a big-time play. Now it's an interception. So to your question, now when you have those clean pockets, when everything's working right now, let's talk about all 11 on the field have to be on the same page. You have great pass protection. The wide receiver wins. Now you have a clean pocket, and you have to be perfect on that throw. That's a lot of pressure. It is, and I'll take it even a step further and kind of compare it to when I was a first-year starting quarterback that, in the same situation Miller did with Jaden Maeva, went through a quarterback battle that lasted all the way into fall camp, right? I went through a quarterback competition with Max Wittick. So then when I finally got my opportunity to be the starter after 3 years or 2 years of waiting, similar to what Miller did. And there is that extra layer of pressure on top of that, and I had to split time those first 2 games with Max Wittick before I became the full-time starter. Miller now had the luxury of having these games under his belt, but still there's a lot of pressure in that. And it's your first year starting, and you're following up a Heisman Trophy winner. There's just so many factors, and you guys have struggled a little bit, and you're 3-3. And all that pressure and the win and loss record is on the head coach and the quarterback, right? You feel that, but you've got to be able to block it out. And the reason I say I truly believe Miller's a guy is because he's proven that he can do it. He even proved it in this game, right? The second to last drive we talked about. He went down there and great on 3rd down, stepped up in the pocket, moved away from the pressure, found Deuce Robinson on a high-level throw, put it high and away so he can go get it, and then a couple plays later threw the potential go-ahead game-winning touchdown to Kyron Hudson. If we would have got another stop on that following drive, we'll talk about here in a minute. But we've seen him do it over and over. We saw him do it against LSU. We saw him play at a high level against Louisville. My biggest thing is he just needs to do it consistently. And to your original question, you don't have to be a perfectionist all the time. And I should probably take that advice as well. And that's something that I struggled with when I was a player. But that's why I'm speaking to Miller from experience, is let the guys around you work. Trust your teammates, trust your head coach and your play callers around you. Lean on the experience that you have, that you've seen, you've done it before. But in those big time moments, you just got to be consistent, take that pressure off of you, and just continue to produce.
Now, we've gotten many questions about this, and I know you have a deep dive going into it, Cody, and we're going to get into it. But talking about that final sequence and regulation, the clock management, I know it was a big topic of conversation after the game. Coach Riley actually addressed it in the post-game press conference. So I'm actually going to play that now so we have the context of his decision-making process, and then you can get into it, Cody.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. It was, when we had the lost yardage play on the, I think it was the first down. We kind of at that point started talking about, all right, do we need to use timeouts and stop the clock? I think it was a 2nd and 12, if I remember right. We were talking about, all right, do we need to use timeouts and stop the clock here? Because all of a sudden it's 2nd and 12. If you don't get anything there, then it's 3rd and 12, and you just potentially bought them, a series, and we weren't in field goal range yet. So, we went back and forth on, do we use them and stop the clock or not? And honestly, I felt so good about how Mike was hitting the ball that we said, you know what, when we got to, I think it was a 3rd and 6 there at the end, it's like, if we convert this, we still got timeouts, maybe go one more shot, and then obviously let him kick the field goal. So how well Mike was kicking it, I think, was the biggest reason I wanted to make sure that it was the last possession.
Yeah, I'm glad you played that, and I think that's important because it does add context into what Coach Riley and his staff are thinking, and those are difficult decisions to make. And it's easy to sit back, from home on your couch, on Twitter, saying this is what we should have done. But when you're in the moment, and I know you can argue this is why they pay Coach Riley or this is why they pay head coaches to make those decisions. You're 100% right, but hindsight is always 20/20 in those moments, right? It's easy to sit back and say we should have done this because X, Y, and Z happened. Well, if Miller Moss hits Deuce Robinson on that slant, which was a great play call, great route, and Miller just missed him a little high, but if we hit him on that play and we get a first down and we have our timeout still and we have one shot at a field goal there, we can, stop the clock there in the middle of the field or center the football, go out there and give Lance a chance to kick the game winner. We're not even having this discussion, right? We're not even talking about this, and we're thinking great clock management. We didn't allow Penn State to touch the football again. Game's over. What a great game called by Lincoln Riley. That's what we're talking about. That's the truth of this sport, right? It's a results-based business. Whatever happens, you go back and look at the decisions, right? So unfortunately, we threw a pick there. We didn't, it seemed a little rushed. Different things happened. But overall, I just want to talk about what happened. I'm sure everyone watched the game, but I'm going to give a breakdown of exactly how the timeline played out and what happened. Why I think what Coach Riley and his staff did was the right decision at the time. But one thing that I wish they would have changed, in my opinion, that I think they could have done differently, right? So starting with the drive and just giving you a breakdown of that. When the drive started, we had 3 timeouts. We had all 3 timeouts left at that point in the game. There's 2 minutes and 52 seconds left when we started our first play of that drive, right? We get a 9-yard completion to Kyron Hudson. So now it's 2nd and 1. Clock is running at 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Woody Marks picks up a first down on 2nd and 1, and we're rolling. Now we hit the 2-minute timeout. So the clock stops. We have all 3 timeouts left, right? We have the ball on our own 37, right? So it's 1st and 10 at the 2-minute timeout. So we're rolling. Things are going good. First play after that, we get an incompletion, right? So that takes 5 seconds off the clock. 2nd and 10 with 1:55 left to go in the game. Makai Lemon gets a 15-yard reception the very next play for a first down, a big pickup. Clock stops on the first downs. We get up, we get set. It's 1st and 10 now on their 49 with 1:26 left to go. This is where Lincoln's quote kind of comes into play and what he was talking about and where they got a little iffy on the decision. We have a negative run to Woody Marks, right? So now we have 2nd and 12 at our own 49 with 48 seconds left to go. The confusing part about that is, or 48 seconds is when the ball was snapped on the next play, but when the play stopped, there was like 1:20 around that. The confusing part is what Lincoln said is your playbook from 2nd and 4 to 5, if we get a positive play, changes completely when it's 2nd and 12. You don't know now. Are we going to pick up a first down? Is it going to be a 3rd and manageable? Is it going to be a 4th down situation where we can go for it? But now if we've already stopped the clock and then Penn State, we don't get it on 3rd down, they're going to stop the clock again. And now they're going to have 1:20 or 1:15 with the football back in their hand, right? That's the confusing part for them is you don't know what's going to happen. So after that, we end up letting the clock run down. 48 seconds are left when we snapped that 2nd and 12 play. We get a completion to Jay Fair. This is where, for me, the biggest decision came in, or the one thing that I, would like to see change or things we could have done differently. But I'll explain what happened first and why I think Lincoln and his staff made the right decision in the moment. So after that play, the completion to Jay Fair, it's now 3rd down. When that play ended, when he got down, there was 40 seconds left to go. If we call a timeout right there, right, and everyone's arguing on Twitter, is we let the clock run from 40 seconds all the way to 14. If we call a timeout right there on 3rd down and the next play we don't get it, and say we take 5 seconds off the clock and we don't get it and they call a timeout because Penn State had 2, or worst case scenario, we get an incompletion and they save both their timeouts, there's now 35 seconds left and we have to punt. Then we punt and say we punt it and we down them or touchback, whatever it may be. They have, and that play takes 5 seconds. They have 2 timeouts with 30 seconds left to go on the clock, and they have already had multiple explosive plays in this football game. That is a bad situation for us to be in. That is not what you want. That's why I think not calling the timeout on that third down play was smart by Coach Riley and his staff, because if we do and we don't get it, then they have a chance to go win the football game. And they go down and get a field goal. They didn't need 7. They go down and get a field goal. Or even another bad scenario is they go down and get a Hail Mary. They get to midfield and they have time left on the clock. They throw a Hail Mary, and who says they don't get it, right? So I am completely okay with not calling a timeout there as soon as that second down play was over or as soon as that third down play was over. Now, if we would have got that completion to Jay Fair on first down and there's, around 40 seconds left and it's only second down instead of third, then you can argue, okay, call timeout. But since it's third, it makes sense to let the clock run so that we guarantee we end the football, or we end the game with the ball in our hands and we have a chance to go get the kick. And like I said, if Miller hits Deuce, Lincoln Riley's a hero. Everyone's a hero. This is a great way that they called it. Now, the only thing I will change with all of that being said, I think we made the right decision. When you watch it back, it makes sense because of those factors. But the only thing I would have liked to see change in that situation was we had 3 timeouts, right? So when that clock was running down, we tried to snap the football still and run a no huddle and get everybody lined up and get everybody set. And luckily, Penn State called the timeout so we could reset. But the ball was going to get snapped at 14 seconds. There was a substitution we tried to have. So then Penn State tried to substitute. It got confusing. Guys weren't lined up right. Guys were trying to figure out, and then the ball was snapped. The only reason I don't like that is, say you're not taking the timeout at the 40 seconds. Fine. But say in the headset or talk to the guy, say, hey, Miller, line up at 22 seconds. We're going to let enough time run off the clock. At 22 seconds, we're going to call a timeout. Everyone's going to come to the sideline, and we're still going to milk the clock a little bit. But now we can get the right play, the right personnel. We're not going no huddle. We can get all our reminders done right on the sideline. Hey, protect the football. No false starts, no dumb penalties. We have to get in the field goal range. Don't try to do too much, right? Talking to the receivers, Coach Simmons can pull them to the side. You can talk to the offensive line with Coach Hinson, just reminders, all these little things to make sure everyone's in the right personnel. Coach Riley can say, hey, what do you guys love here? What's the play we can get to? And you still only leave 22 seconds on the clock, or around 20 seconds. So you have enough time for 2 plays, a couple timeouts, and you can kick the field goal. That's the only thing that I wish we would have done differently, is not taking the timeout at 40 seconds, but take it at 22. Because then if you don't get it and you have to punt, or if, whatever happens, you're only giving them now 8 seconds or 10 seconds left instead of 30, right? Which is still not ideal, but at least you're putting yourself in the best position to win the football game by calling a timeout with 22 seconds instead of trying to be hurry up and get confusion. Now, luckily, Penn State called the timeout, so we got to come off on the sideline, figure out the play we wanted. We put Woody Marks in the slot to tell Miller Moss that it's man or zone. He saw that it's man-to-man. They ended up playing 2-man on that play. A beautiful, beautiful, beautiful route from Deuce Robinson. Keely, I've told you so many times, if you want to win in college, if you want to play in the NFL, you have to win on slant routes.
Yep.
Deuce Robinson had inside leverage, attacked the outside shoulder, cut back across. Great job by our offensive line and protection. They blocked it perfectly, right? They did a great job. I talked about Wisconsin game. We got hurt with the twist stunts. They did exactly that. They did a defensive end and a defensive tackle twist. Elijah Page, Emmanuel Pregnon passed it off perfectly. Miller Moss had the pocket that he needed. He just missed the throw, right? And that's frustrating. And if he hits him right there, we're not even talking about this in the first place, but if he also hits him in the face mask on Deuce Robinson and doesn't fall off, and I think, again, that's a little bit of a product of the hits he's taken, and he stays in there and makes the throw, Deuce catches it, and 2-man, there's no one in the middle of the field, so he catches that slant. He's getting at least to the 30, maybe the 25, and Michael Lance has a 45-yarder to win the football game, right? So we're not talking about that. But with all it being said, now when you watch it back and you really focus on what it meant and why the timeout wasn't called, it 100% makes sense. I think at the end of the day, it was the right call, even hindsight with what happened. The only thing I would have liked to see them do differently was call a timeout, not right when we got down, not at 40 seconds, but let it get down to 22, maybe 20, then call your timeout. Let everyone know, hey, come to the sideline, final reminders, protect the football, get down when you get it. Don't try to do too much. We still have 2 timeouts, offensive line, no dumb penalties, no false starts, get the perfect play that you want, the perfect personnel. Then you go out there. Now, fortunately, Penn State called the timeout, so we didn't have to rush. But when we did, you could see guys, you go watch it back. You see guys coming in and out, trying to figure out what substitution we are. Guys aren't lining up, and then we're trying to hurry up. Take a deep breath, call a timeout there about 20, 22 seconds, get in the perfect play, and then hit it. But like I said, with all that being said, we had a chance to win the football game. We just didn't make the play when we needed to.
And to your point at the top, it's just crazy to me, and I feel like it's been especially highlighted in this season in particular, just how small the margin of error is in college football, but I'm sure in the NFL it's even higher. But there's just so many decisions and small plays that make such a huge difference in these games, and especially what we've seen this season for USC. So, and we have questions about that too, so I'll probably share more of my thoughts on that matter later in the episode. But before we move on to defense, Cody, any final thoughts on USC's offense?
The last thing I will say that I didn't touch on, and it's another negative, and I hate to finish on a negative, but third down. We have to be better on third down. We had 0 third down conversions in the first half. As a whole, we went 2 for 11 on the day on third down in some big time moments. Just have to be better. And we've been good this year on third down. We knew Penn State had a good third down defense. I think they were holding their opponents to around 33%, but 2 of 11 is not winning football, especially in some of those got-to-have-it situations. Extend those drives. We've got to be better. But overall, I think there are a lot of positives to take from this football game. It's just unfortunate that it gets overshadowed, from a loss. But I thought our offensive line took a huge step forward. Love seeing some of those explosive plays. And you could tell, too, in those explosive plays, you could feel the momentum, in the Coliseum when you have those big plays, when you have those quick drives. That's how you keep the crowd in it. That's what we've been wanting, to start fast and have that energy early on. And we did a great job of that. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a great performance by our offense, something to build off of, and obviously there's areas that we can be better so we can win that football game. And Miller, is something I talked about, that he's going to have to look in the mirror and self-reflect a little bit and do some self-scout and take that next step. I'm 100% believe that he will. He's a tough kid. He knows how to get the job done. He knows how to go out there and make some throws. We've seen it against LSU. We've seen some of those big time moments against Penn State, the second to last drive to go down and throw that, potential go ahead touchdown. So I may have sounded overcritical in this segment, but I think it's very important when you're 3-3 and 1-3 in conference play. You have to look at these things as a whole. And like I said, I watched the film over and over, but offensively, I'm just so proud of the fight and some of the improvements that we did make. And I'm expecting to see that get better going into next week.
Alrighty, Cody, I want to go to the other side of the ball and look at USC's defensive performance. Before we do, just want to give a thanks to Audi. What you expect from an SUV is a range of sizes to fit your lifestyle. Expectations matter, but exceeding them matters more. The Audi family of SUVs, progress you can feel. Now, Cody, in our preview episode, we talked about Penn State's offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, and how he likes to be creative. He likes to use a lot of packages. Did you expect him to be as creative as we saw on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, in our preview episode, I talked about, all the funky looks he's going to use, all the exotic looks that he likes to use. And that was evident on Saturday. He did that so many times. But I also talked about, at the base, this is a spread offense that does have some pro-style tendencies. It's not going to be every single play a different package or an exotic look or a weird personnel grouping. It's going to be, some base plays, some base formations, which they did. But I truly believe in this football game, he did a lot more than he's shown in the past. I mean, it was crazy. It felt like they did more of these exotic looks consistently than they actually did just lining up in base packages or going 3 wide or 4 wide and running normal plays, I guess, in an offensive scheme. But it was just, I can only imagine Danton Lynn as a defensive coordinator, and he's been phenomenal, at these in-game adjustments. I can only imagine getting on the sideline of the tablet and talking to your staff around you and talking to the players with some of these looks that they saw and figuring out how they're going to handle that going forward. That's got to be so difficult in the moment. And just some of the things I wrote down going back and watching the film, and I didn't get all of them, but just some of the stuff they did on Saturday, for context. They had times where Tyler Warren, their tight end, lined up at center, right? He lined up at wide receiver. He lined up at running back. He lined up at quarterback and ran the football. He lined up at quarterback and threw the football. Then you had times their left guard, Ione, that we talked about before, coming in motion across the formation, right? Using him as a fly motion like Zachariah Branch does. Then they had times where he's lined up in the backfield with another linebacker or with another fullback or another, offensive lineman in the backfield with the running back behind them. Then they had times where Bo Pribula, their backup quarterback, is back there at quarterback. And then they have Drew Aller at slot, or they have Drew Aller split out wide where Warren's snapping at the Pribula. Then they throw it to Aller or Drew Aller, and then he throws it to Tyler Warren. So there's so many crazy things they did. There's multiple times, like I said, they use multiple quarterback looks, right? Where Pribula could throw it. He can hand it off. He can do different zone read things. It's just got to be so difficult as a defensive coordinator to game plan for that. And then you go into a game and he's doing it at the pace that he was and consistently as he was, to where now you have to make those in-game adjustments to so many different formations and so many different packages and so many different looks. I can't imagine, how stressful that was for Lynn and his, coaching staff on the sideline. But they did a good job. Obviously, there's some areas that they could be better at, and we'll talk about that. But overall, I thought they handled all those different looks well and did a good job of getting some of those stops and keeping them limited, especially in the first half of this football game.
Well, you mentioned tight end Tyler Warren, and that was another thing that actually came up in our preview, Cody. You said in gotta-have-it situations, they're going to go to number 44, and they definitely did. It was actually a historic day for him. Unfortunately, in USC's case, he set USC's opponent record with 17 receptions, which was previously held by tight end Dalton Kincaid. And ironically, it was a similar performance. It felt like. What did you make of the performance he had? And I will argue, as you just laid out, Warren was used in many different ways than Kincaid was, but it still was a very, very powerful performance for Warren.
Yeah, and unfortunately, not only was it a record against USC, 17 catches is the most in FBS history, or tied for the most for a tight end in a single game. So that's just frustrating. And that's the important question, right? How do you let one player dictate so much of their offense or dictate the outcome of a football game and not find a way to get the job done? Well, like we just mentioned, do you understand, how difficult it is to cover a player who lines up at quarterback, who lines up at tight end, who lines up at running back, who then lines up at wide receiver, who then lines up at center? And let that sink in. Their tight end is lining up as a center. How many times are you going to use that sentence and when you talk about a football game, right, on a recap episode, that, hey, we got to worry about their tight end lining up at center, snapping the football, and then they put five guys to his right. Yeah,
it wasn't even like they put him in the middle of the field or in the middle of the formation.
That's what I'm saying is like that's you wonder why he was wide open so many times. It's because of how many different ways they use him and how many different times he lined up in unique formations or unique positions. It is extremely difficult to cover someone, especially when they have playmakers on the outside, right? We talked about all three of their receivers averaging over 16 yards per catch. Two of them are averaging over 22 and a half yards per catch, right? So we have to be able to account for those guys, but also you have a tight end that's continuously making big time plays. And then you also have two of the best running backs in college football. So yeah, it is tough. It is a matchup nightmare. You may think, just put three guys on Warren. Well, guess what? They have great running backs in the backfield. They have great receivers outside. They can hurt you as well. That did hurt us on some of those drives when we did bracket Warren or we took him out of the play. They were hitting us with some big-time plays on the outside. They had 400 yards passing, right? And Warren had 224 of those, but there were other guys that were making plays on the field as well. But I'm with you on that. That's something for me that's frustrating in this game and something that's hurt us before. And this is unique with Kotelnicki, and you got to give him credit where credit is due. And that's why I talked about that, a couple of minutes ago about how many different looks he used. It's tough to cover a guy that lines up in all those different places, right? I'm not going to put that blame on Len and say that, hey, you got to get one guy taken care of. You got to get him out. If this was a first-time thing, right, then it's easier to say, all right, that's a one-time thing. We'll learn from it. We'll get it done. But last week, Darius Taylor, Minnesota's running back, was pretty much their entire offense, right? He led the team in rushing, had explosive play after explosive play on the ground, and he also led their team in receiving yards as well out of the backfield. So it just feels like when we lose these football games, and you go back to the Michigan game, I know Donovan Edwards played well, but Mullings, their running back, was the one that kept having those explosive plays and that really put the team on his back and hurt us in the long run in that football game, right? We did a good job of containing Alex Orji. We contained some of their playmakers on the outside. They didn't throw the football a whole lot. Donovan Edwards didn't really get going, but Mullings, took over that football game and really hurt us, especially on that final drive. So it just feels like in some of these losses, and, I know Lynn wasn't here before, but just in years past with some of the players that have still been here, that one player takes over a football game and we don't find a way to get them stopped and we don't have an answer for them. Now, this is to the extreme with 17 receptions, 224 yards as a tight end, setting the FBS record or tying the FBS record for receptions in a game and taking it a step further. Warren is the first FBS tight end to go for over 200 yards in a football game since, you just said it, guess who? Dalton Kincaid against USC in 2022. So those are just, and I'm not trying to pile on the negativity here. I'm not trying to pile on the negative stats. I just think it's important that it add context to the situation and something that's been a reoccurring theme, not only this year, but in years of past, to where we can't let one player dictate the outcome of a football game. We have to find a way to think, okay, this is the key player on their football team. Let's take them out of it. Even if they're using them in these different packages, we have to get the job done, because at the end of the day, we can make those excuses about all the different looks and different formations they did, but we still have to know where he's at all times. And we previewed that. We talked about that. It's not like this was his first game that he came out of nowhere. He was a leading receiver in catches and yards for this Penn State football team. He was a guy that they wanted to find in those got-to-have-it situations. I know Lynn watches a ton of film, so we just had to find a way to get the job done and get him stopped. Even later on in the football game, that's where it was most important for me. Early on in the game, he has 5 catches on the first drive. Okay, the point of emphasis for the day is going to be find Tyler Warren. Denton Lynn is phenomenal at in-game adjustments or halftime adjustments. Let's take him out. Let's find ways to get him out of the game plan. Let's find ways to eliminate him from the game plan and cover him. And I know there's other playmakers on the outside and other players on the field, but if we know that their point of emphasis is to get him the football, and Kamari Ramsey did some things well when covering him. Zion Branch made some big-time pass breakups when it could have been, an even better day for Warren. So I got to give them credit in that situation. But there were times, especially later on in the football game, when we knew they wanted to get him the football, that he was walking wide open, that he was running some flat routes wide open, that he ran a wheel route down the sideline wide open. I mean, there was no one within 5 to 10 yards of him when he already had 14 or 13 catches at that time. So that's the frustrating part for me, and that's something that, you expect to get fixed going forward. And I know it will. And I know Danton Lynn's been phenomenal with some of these adjustments, but we talked about this is going to be the ultimate chess match between Danton Lynn and Andy Kotelnicki. And as much as we won some, especially in the run game, got to give credit to Kotelnicki. He did a great job of game planning and putting his guys in great, position to win. And he found a way to get Tyler Warren open all day long and get him the football.
To your point about stopping the run, both you and Lynn had previewed that this was the best 1-2 punch as far as running the ball goes in the country, and USC was able to stop them, especially coming off of a game against Minnesota where I thought, and Riley talked about as well, that he didn't think that they did well in the run defense portion of the game. How do you turn it around and face this team and do it better in that sense? What did you see from the film?
Yeah, I was very worried about this going into this game. I think literally Thursday, Friday leading up to this and doing my prep for Trojan Tailgate Show. And after we did the podcast, I even texted you. I said, was I too, critical about how good they are running the football and how worried I am about us stopping the run? And you were like, you were honest, and that's how I felt about it. So I was very worried about that. Thursday, Friday, doing my prep for the pregame show was, thinking, how are we going to stop the run, especially with how Minnesota attacked us a week ago. And Kotelnicki's watching that film, and they have, in my opinion, better running backs than Minnesota does, or better depth, at least at that position, than a lot of teams do in the entire country. And Singleton was coming back from injury, so we didn't know if he was fully 100% or if he was going to be ready to go or how effective he was going to be. But Katron Allen, their other running back, had been very dominant up to that point. Singleton was averaging 7.7 yards per carry. Allen was at 5 yards per carry. Then you had Bo Pribula, their backup quarterback, who came in with the Pribula package, and Wildcat, which averaging over 7 yards per carry. So yeah, I was very worried going into this football game, and we absolutely passed the test. Beyond past the test. This was phenomenal defense by USC. They only gave up 118 yards rushing on 31 attempts. That's 3.8 yards per carry. That is winning football, especially against a team that's averaging 217 yards per game on the ground. One of the top teams in the country at running the football. Very good offensive line, very physical offensive line. Now, I talked about how it was a young and inexperienced offensive line, but they had made a point of emphasis the last couple of weeks of we're going to run the football at will. And they were doing just that. We came in and we made it a point of emphasis to show them that we could stop the run, right? And I was so proud of that by Danton Lynn and Coach Henderson and this defensive line. We rotated a lot of guys up front. A lot of young players had to play because of how many different looks they were doing, how fast they were going on offense, how many times they were rotating guys. We had to keep our guys fresh. I was so proud of the young guys up front. I thought Nate Clifton played phenomenal football. We did a great job of showing that we can be physical. And if you ask me on offense and defense, taking out, obviously, Tyler Warren on some of those plays and taking out the pass game. I know they threw for 400 yards passing, and that is unacceptable. That can't happen. We have to be better there. But a big point that I was worried about in this football game was stopping the run. I truly believe we did that, and it was so cool to see how physical we were with this team and see our defense go from, last week against Minnesota, watching that tape, learning from it, and then making a point of emphasis this week to come back and stop the run and be physical up front.
You mentioned the 400 passing yards. I feel like obviously USC's faced a lot of run-first teams, run-heavy teams. Do you feel like this is the first time that USC's secondary really got tested in that sense?
Yeah, and that's something that's a little concerning, right? And last year in the Pac-12, you play a lot of pass-heavy football teams. You learn a lot about your secondary pretty early on, in the season or pretty early on in conference play. We had yet to play a team that liked to throw the football over the field. We thought Minnesota was, or based off their stats and what they've done on the game film, was going to be a team that threw the football more than they ran it. But the run game was working, so they stuck heavy with that. And we did a good job in defending their pass and stopping Brosmer from having those big-time plays. But we knew Drew Aller from years prior had struggled pushing the football down the field. It struggled his completion percentage. That's why they brought in Andy Kotelnicki, and they wanted to be more aggressive in the pass game. And we really thought this was going to be a true test for our secondary to see what they can do. It's tough to say, did they pass? Yes. We gave up 400 yards passing, so that's a negative. That can't happen. You don't want to have a team go out there and throw the ball for 400 yards. You don't want to have a tight end that goes for 224. Now, we did have 3 interceptions, so that part we passed. It was great to see us get some turnovers. We did a great job in the first half of slowing them down. They did have some of those explosive plays through the air, but they weren't putting points on the board early on in the football game, so that was great to see. Now, the second half is when their pass game really got going, and that affected us, especially on that last touchdown when they threw the swing pass out to Singleton. We just had some, no one in the area, and it just felt like too many times in this football game. And it's tough, not being in the film room and not knowing exactly what their assignments are on the back end or what guys are supposed to be doing or who maybe is at fault here. But we saw a couple times where guys are running wide open, like Singleton on that last play for a touchdown, like Tyler Warren multiple times. They had one, I think, over route to one of their wide receivers. It was wide open as well, to where it just felt like that had to have been an MA or a missed assignment is what that means, or just a coverage bust on the back end. But there were too many times that there were uncontested catches, and that's what's frustrating for me. So is it great that we got to get this test done right now and, have a team that was very aggressive through the air and showed some of our flaws in our coverage? Absolutely. It's something we can learn from. But I also understand that Jacoby Covington was out, right? Keely Arnold had struggled at being 100% at times. We had guys that were rotating in. Prophet Brown played a good amount. We were rotating guys in. John Humphrey had to play a lot this football game. So, there was a lot of guys that were playing a lot more than they're used to. And I think Penn State knew that, and they took advantage of that, and then obviously now you're playing a team to where pre-snap communication is huge, and you have some new faces on the field that are having to move all over the place and identify strength of formation and pre-snap, identify motion, identify all these things, and the ball snaps. So I think that was a big part of it. And again, that's credit to Kotelnicki and good job that he does. But yeah, I mean, that's a little concerning. I wish I could say, hey, it's a one-time thing. We'll learn from it. We'll get better. But giving up 400 yards passing to a team that, I don't want to say is run heavy as much as a Michigan or as much as, teams that we played before, but a team that wasn't known for throwing the football over the field besides some explosive plays, comes out and puts 400 yards up in passing. I think there needs to be some questions that are answered this week in practice, and we need to make it a point of emphasis of getting back to covering well and going back to some one-on-ones this week at practice and being able to win in the secondary a lot more than we did on Saturday.
We got a question from De La Cruz, who said the offensive line has received a ton of criticism, but why has the defensive line struggled to generate pressure so far? We are halfway through the season and they've yet to record a sack. Now, I don't know if that's exactly true, Cody. I guess it depends on what he counts as defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, on the edge, we've had Braylon Shelby has a sack. I know that. I know Devin Tompkins, I think, has a sack and a half. So we have created some pressure from those guys. I think he's maybe talking about the interior of this defensive line. But either way, De La Cruz, this is something that I've been very big on this year of being able to generate pressure in the backfield, of getting some of those sacks. You want to talk about explosive plays on defense? One way you can do it is getting a turnover, right? Getting an interception, getting a fumble. But another way you can do it is having a sack fumble, right? Having those big plays in the backfield. Those are such high momentum plays for the defense, especially the guys up front. And we have just struggled in that category this year. Even going back to this game, we'll talk about some of those final plays here in a minute. But we had opportunities on that last drive with free rushers to get home. Lynn dialed up some amazing play calls on that final drive, and we just weren't getting the job done. There's times this year we've seen Anthony Lucas get so close and doing a good job in his pass rush. Jameel Muhammad, like I said, Braylon Shelby has a sack. Some other guys have done a great job of getting close, but just not getting there, right? But we have to see those results happen. We have to see some of those sacks. I'd love to see some sack fumbles, getting some pressure on the quarterback, getting them off their spot. We did have some good hits on Drew Aller this football game. I will say that. We did a good job of making him move around a little bit and making him uncomfortable, but just not enough, right? 6 sacks in 6 games is not winning football. A year ago at UCLA, Lynn had 43 sacks with his unit. This year at SC, like I said, we only have 6 so far this year. We are struggling to see production in that area. And we have good players. And Danton Lynn, and he said it before, he said, look, we've got to continue to develop our players as pass rushers. And I'll say it for him, though, he's doing a good job of putting guys in the right spot. He's doing a good job of bringing these all-out pressures or bringing some and mixing up these looks and bringing some of these blitzes to where we're getting plenty of one-on-one opportunities. We are just not winning enough. We have to win at a higher success rate. We have to be able to get to the quarterback and get the football out. But that's something, if we want to take the next step on defense and help out our secondary and help out our linebackers out and do a better job, we have to find some pressure, especially from our defensive line in the backfield.
Now, you mentioned defensive rotation earlier, and Riley was actually asked a question about that in the postgame, so I'm going to read it. He said, we didn't do it enough against Minnesota. We felt like that was something that we needed to get better at. We needed to trust some of these young guys, and I think they've also given us some reasons to want to trust them. We saw some young guys go in there and make some big-time plays in a big ball game. So obviously developing that depth is going to be important with the stretch we've had and with the stretch that we've got ahead of us.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and I want to touch on that again real quick before we move on. I think it's so important, and we've talked about developing young players, right? And that's what Coach Riley talks about all the time, and that's what's so important nowadays. In these in the transfer era of college football, of you have to develop these younger guys to hopefully keep them around and want them to know that they can be successful in this scheme, to know that they can get some opportunities of playing time. And that was a big thing going into this football game, is our defensive line, keeping them fresh, right? Nate Clifton and Gavin Meyer have done a phenomenal job. Kobe Pepe, another guy who's played very well this year, but we want to see some more rotation up front. I think Jade Abasiri played very well in this football game. I love the way that, there's a couple plays where you see his name getting called. You see him making some plays in the backfield. You see him being physical up front. You got to throw some of those guys in the fire and allow them to learn from that and build some depth on this defense, especially some guys that we have lost up front. Now it's time for these younger guys to step up, and I think they're doing just that. So that's great to see. That's something to keep an eye on going forward. But we've got to continue at all levels of the defense, right? The defensive line, the linebackers, and the secondary continue to let some of these younger guys play and get some experience, and that's going to help them so much, going forward in some of these games down the line.
Now, we knew this Penn State offense had a tendency to start slow in the first half, but given Lynn's ability and what we've seen from him in second half adjustments, were you surprised at how Penn State came out to start the second half and just kind of nailed those two first drives?
Yeah, that was something that's been a huge advantage for us, on the defensive side of the football. I guess on both sides of the football, and that's been kind of the story of this football team, right? The story of two halves, and whether it's our offense or defense, struggling at times, starting slow and then picking it up in the second half, or having a great first half in this game and then slowing down a little bit in the second half. But that was something for me that was surprising. I thought that was going to be in our advantage, but when you go up against an offensive coordinator like Andy Kotelnicki, who's very good at those in-game adjustments as well, there's going to be some give and takes, right? And those first two drives, like you mentioned, they come out, go 5 plays, 75 yards and a touchdown. Then we turn around, come down, and have an unfortunate drive. We get some big plays. We get a holding call by Woody Marks when we get within the 5-yard line, being able to go in there and score. Now we get punched back. We have to punt it. And then that following drive, they go 8 plays, 90 yards for a touchdown. And just like that, it's a tie football game, right? And we're feeling so good about ourselves going into half, and they turn around and have 2 great drives, and they come down. You got to give them credit, right? They did a good job of seeing what our game plan was for the football game. Again, Kotelnicki used some of those, funky plays or those exotic looks or different personnel groupings on those drives. That's the one where they had Tyler Warren play center, snap it back to Pribula, throwing it to Aller, and then he throws it to Warren. And Zion Branch was in a great position, right? We had guys in right spots on some of those plays as well. So this isn't all on Lynn. There's times that he had guys dialed up on some of these play calls in the right spot. We just weren't making the plays when we needed to make them, right? And that was a big story of this football game, especially on one of those final drives, toward the end of the game. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But yeah, that was a little frustrating. That's something that has been, a strength for us this year, is those second half adjustments. And this time it became a weakness, especially early on. But you got to give credit right back to us. We did a good job after that drive of getting that interception when Kamari Ramsey knocked the football up in the air and Mascarenas Arnold got a pick. So our defense kept us in this football games at times when our offense struggled, and we played very good complementary football. It just felt like we didn't do it the entire game at the right time, and it hurt us a little bit there at the end. But overall, I was proud of, although, I'll say third quarter adjustments weren't great when they came out. We did a good job of kind of buckling down and making some stops there at the end besides that final drive. But in the middle of that second half, when it felt like Penn State could take over and take the lead and start running away with it, or getting the momentum back to their side, we made some of those stops we needed to make. So that was huge to see and very, encouraging going forward. But overall, yeah, we held them to 6 points in the first half, but in the second half and overtime combined, they ended up scoring 27. And that's just uncharacteristic from what we've seen from Denton Lynn here at USC.
An area of concern you've identified this season when it comes to USC's defense, Cody, is its opponent's fourth down conversion rate. And it seemed like it reared its ugly head again on Saturday. What did you see from Penn State in that category?
Yeah, that's an area, that I've said we really need to improve on. And, it's held true in our losses this year. We've struggled to get off the field on fourth down, and this was another example of that. I will start with the positive, though, before I jump into that. On third down, we were great. We held Penn State to 4 of 13 conversion. That's 30%. When you hold your opponent to a 30% conversion rate and get off the field on third down, that is winning football. But now when it comes to fourth down, that's something that we've struggled with before, and it's cost us football games at times, right? We've been very crucial of our offense and those got-to-have-it situations of going down and scoring and being able to put the football game away or being able to take a lead when it's a tie game. Our offense did that in this football game, right? When there was 10 minutes and 50 seconds left, the second to last drive, we went down there and scored, took 5 minutes off the clock, and gave our defense a chance with the lead to get a stop, to get off the field and put this game away. Now, I know Penn State had a couple timeouts, so offensively we had to get a couple first downs, and we did have one more drive on offense. You can talk about all that, but with 5 minutes left to go in this football game, we gave our defense a chance to get a stop and really put this game away, and we struggled. And on that drive, Penn State had 2 fourth down conversions, 2 fourth down plays, got-to-have-it situations with the game on the line, and we could not get off the field. And if you go back to that, the last couple of games that we lost, both of those games against Michigan and Minnesota, against Michigan, they went 3 of 3 on fourth down, and one of those was on the final drive to get that touchdown, the final play of the game down at the goal line. And then against Minnesota, again, they went 2 for 2 on fourth down and got-to-have-it situations, and one of those was to win the football game on that tush push. Now, I know we argued about the review and what that is, but, that's hindsight now, and very frustrating at the time, but it's still 2 for 2 and 3 for 3, and our 2 losses on fourth down conversions is not winning football. And then this week against Penn State, they go 2 for 2, and both of those were on the final drive. And it's frustrating because that final drive, we played so well. We did so many good things. We had so many opportunities to win that game, right? I thought Dan Lynn did a great job of dialing up some of those defensive play calls. I thought our guys did a great job of making big-time plays over and over. We just didn't make it when we had to have it on the key moments in that game. We called a corner cap pressure where we got a free hit. Corner cap means corner blitz. A corner blitz pressure where we get a free hit on Drew Aller, right? And we force a big-time play like that. Then a couple plays later, we have a play where Kamari Ramsey, they do a great job of in and outing. He comes downhill, makes a great play on the football, great break from the secondary position, has the football in his hands, both hands, right? Has a pick in his hands, and he drops it. And that's a tough play to make. But again, he has an interception there. Game's over. Or we give our offense a chance with the lead to run the game out or run the clock out. Then a couple plays later, we have them on 4th and 10 on that gotta have it play. Dial up a beautiful pressure. We put Jameel Muhammad at a linebacker position, make it look like we're overloading, and then he gets a free rush coming from that side, and he just misses Drew Aller. He does a great job, Aller buying time and getting away from him, and then he finds his receiver running an end route on John Humphrey, and John Humphrey knew the play was coming. You could tell on the TV copy when they ran it back, he knew the end cut was coming. He just didn't trust it, and you could tell he was coached on that before. He just hesitated for a second, and we talk about margin for error. When it's that small, he's a half second late. Now they make the play, and if he makes it, we're off the field. Or if Jameel Muhammad makes that sack, or if Kamari Ramsey makes that pick, or if that corner cap pressure, the corner blitz pressure gets there a half second sooner, and it's a sack fumble instead of him getting the ball after just so many things that we did well. There was a frustrating part of that drive on 3rd and 10, right before that 4th and 10 conversion. They had a blatant false start that the refs missed, and it should have been 4th and 15, right? That's something that you can't argue. Was it maybe it was a call, a PI? Those can be, things that you can argue about, and it's really
subjective
perspective. Yeah, when it comes to those. But that one was, you see the tackle, move, and very obvious. Braylon Shelby jumping him down, pointing at him. They call timeout. They don't call it. So a lot of things just went wrong on that drive, both in our control and out of our control. But the things that we had control over was a 4th and 7 and a 4th and 10. And both of those we failed to get a stop. They had the same play on the dig route to the bottom of the screen, picking up a first down, but we had an opportunity to get off the field. And all 3 of our losses, our opponents have had a 100% conversion rate on 4th down. That is something in those gotta-have-it moments. I gave Miller a tough time about those big-time plays. You want to win those football games and make those plays in the gotta-have-it situations. Same thing for our defense. If you want to be a very good football team, a great football team, you have to be able to make those stops on those 4th down conversions and get off the field and win those games.
Well, we have more topics to get to, Cody, but I'm actually going to save that for the question portion. Do you have any other thoughts on USC's defensive performance before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much emptied my notebook, but just the final thing I'll say is I thought we did a great job on that opening drive for Penn State. They had a lot of momentum on that drive, and they made some big-time plays. We did a good job of making a goal line stand there, and I know they got the penalty, which pushed them back, but we held them, on 3 straight plays down there in the red zone or down by the goal line, held them to 3. That is a huge momentum, for our defense, and our offense came down and scored on the very next play. So that was big to see. Another guy I got to give a shout-out to, and I mentioned him briefly at the top of the show, but I love seeing some of these younger guys make some plays. Desmond Stevens had a huge interception on that play. And obviously Eric Gentry's been out and he's been missed. But we've had Anthony Beavers come in. We've had Desmond Stevens play there a little bit. So that was a huge spark play for him. And like I said, a lot of things that we need to get fixed and we need to work on, not allowing one player to make those big time plays. We got to get off the field on 4th down. But overall, there were a lot of things that were positive in this football game, specifically stopping the run against a very good running football team, and a lot of stuff that we can learn from going forward and improve on and use that momentum for the rest of the season.
Alrighty, Cody, let's head over into questions. Before we do, just want to give a thanks to Audi. Focus matters. Listen closely. The Audi Q8 e-tron's cabin is serenely quiet, so you can focus on other things like having tomorrow's technology today. The new fully electric Audi Q8 e-tron, how we get there matters. And at Ralph's, everyone wins when it comes to saving big, because when you order online through the Ralph's app, you get the same great prices, deals, and rewards on pickup or delivery that you do in store. So no matter how you shop, you always save big at Ralph's. Ralph's, fresh for everyone. Cody Kessler.
Fight on.
Fight on.
And
with
confetti
on the Sunday episodes.
For those who don't know, my computer does animations when I do that. They actually, off topic here, before we get to questions, did you see when we did the Minnesota game and Sean and Jordan, I think I told you about that.
Yeah.
We're on the computer, the laptop recording or whatever it was. Sean did something and it gave him like hard eyes, and then it gave him he did 1-2 like with a fight on. There's some balloons.
There you go.
He had the animation like that. But Anyways, we're getting off topic. I don't know how to turn that off. You're going to see that every Sunday, so look forward to that confetti when we do the fight on Ralph Sadreed.
Alrighty, we got a question from Jonathan who said, do you think our defensive line ran out of gas later in the second half? Felt like the Minnesota game all over again, he says.
No, I don't think so. I thought we did a very good job of, rotating up front. We talked about getting some of the younger guys in and some of the impacts that the freshman players made, and that was exciting to see. We did multiple times throughout this game where we would rotate different groups up front, every other series. So I thought we did a good job of being physical the entire game, and that really held true in the run game. Now, could the pass, rush be a little bit better and get home to the quarterback, especially late in the game when you're tired and you're fatigued? But so is Penn State up front with their offensive line. Yeah, we could be better there, and you'd like to see that for all four quarters, and especially at the beginning of this football game when everyone's fresh. But no, I thought we did a good job, especially with Coach Henderson, keeping fresh bodies on the field and rotating some of those guys and being able to be aggressive up front in the trenches.
Now, you mentioned at the top of the show that maybe Zachariah Branch is not having the season he maybe envisioned for himself, at least at this point in the year. Jake had a question that said, do you think it's time to reduce his snaps at wide receiver, he asked.
I don't. I really don't, because I think you need to continue to try to build that confidence, right? And I know it can be frustrating when, we're 6 games in. We haven't seen that spark that we saw a year ago. We haven't really seen him take that next step and get back to being confident and being the playmaker that we know he can be. But the other side of that is it can always be he's one play away, right? It could just be that big time momentum changing play, that touchdown catch, that deep home run play, the kick return, the punt return, to where we see him get right back into form. Now, if this was his first year and he was a younger guy and we really didn't know what he was capable of and we thought he was struggling, then okay, I can understand maybe sitting him a little bit, letting him learn from some of the older guys. But he's already put on tape a year ago how good he can be. And we know how explosive he can be. It's not like that's not there. It's not like he doesn't have it. We know he does. It's just about him unlocking that again. I think a big part of that is getting out of his own head. You can see him thinking a lot, and he said it before himself, trying to think what his next move is instead of being aggressive and putting his foot in the ground and making a cut and make the defense react to him. He's just thinking too much right now. Now, the other side of that I will say, and I don't think reduce his snaps, but allow some more competition in practice, right? When you're a guy that's struggling a little bit and the coaches are letting maybe some of your backups get some more reps at practice, that'll push you, that'll motivate you a bit more. That might frustrate you a little bit and light a fire under you that gets you going. So that's one way I can see it, but I would hate to see us right now go away from him or bench him or take him off the field when we know what he's capable of. I think you have to keep working with him. He is a very good playmaker. Now, if some of the other guys are playing better at the time or at the moment, or if Jacoby has a hot hand or Deuce has a hot hand, I don't want to take away some place from him to try to force feed Zachariah the football. But I think taking him out right now would only hurt him more than help him because of how good of a playmaker he can be and what we've seen before in the past.
In your opinion, as a former quarterback, is it an issue per se that maybe USC's offense hasn't identified like a number one go-to receiver at this point in the season?
Yeah, I mean, we kept having questions of who that was going to be, right? First, we thought it was Kyron Hudson after the first game. Then we thought Jacoby Lane, after some of the big games he had, especially against Wisconsin. Deuce Robinson made a case for himself, in some of these games. So it's tough to really identify who that number one player is, but it's also tough to really figure out what our identity is on offense. And I don't think if you asked a lot of Trojan fans this year, they would have said that we're going to be a run-first football team with 2 dominant running backs, right? Especially with Woody Marks, who's a new player on this team, and Quentin Joyner, who was a freshman a year ago, who ended up redshirting. So, there's just so many questions that I think continue to get answered on this football team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, but one that's still unanswered, like you just said, is who is that true wide receiver one? And before he got hurt, Lake McCree was actually our leading receiver.
Yeah.
And this football game, if you had to ask me going off of just Penn State, I'd say Mekhi Lemon. I thought Mekhi Lemon made some big-time plays and made some big-time catches in this football game, especially later on in this game on that last drive or second to last drive. So that was great to see. But, yeah, it's tough. The spot's still open. It, in my opinion, still can be Zachariah. I just think he's struggling to find an identity in this offense and really – is he going to be better on the outside at slot? Does he do better in the slot fade routes, which I think we try to force too many times, or maybe just Miller putting the ball over the top like I talked about instead of trying to give him a back shoulder because he's not one of those bigger guys. Let him run under it and run by somebody. Or do we like using him on crosser routes, screen routes? There's only so many, there's only so many different screens or quick passes or bubble routes that you can do to him that are going to work before you have to start finding other options, right? So I think the spot's still open. I think Zachariah could be that guy. I think Jacoby Lane, Deuce, Mekhi are guys that are also in the running for that. Kyron Hudson's still not out of it, in my opinion. But, yeah, at this point in the season, you'd really like to see, one of those guys step up and be Miller's go-to player to where if the game's on the line or these got to have it situations, you know that he can find him and they're going to make the big time plays in those moments.
Officiating was once again a hot topic in our question section. Cody Andrew said Big Ten officiating has been horrendous to say the least. Trojan Mom said it's very evident that our last two games could have resulted in different outcomes if called correctly. And I do think it's interesting. We saw like national reporters also comment on officiating, Cody. So it's not just a USC fan gripe, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that, in my opinion, has been a topic for a couple games this year. And look, I hate talking about the officials. I hate blaming it on the officials. And Coach Riley has talked about before. There's other aspects in this game that don't just come down to officiating, but there are a couple times, including last week against Minnesota, on that review where it's supposed to be indisputable video evidence, and they they overturn a stop call to a touchdown. There's a couple times against Michigan where there were a couple calls that were controversial and that we had some arguments for this week. I left it out on purpose of our recap portion of this and talking about offense and defense. I figured we were gonna get some questions, so I did write some notes down about it overall. But yeah, I mean, just it's tough. Again, like I said, to blame the officials, but it is true that there are some calls to where you see it, and then you have Gene Statutor get on as an analyst as well and say, I don't agree with that. I don't like that. Why didn't we review that? I don't like that call continuously. It happened multiple times in this game. And just a couple that I wrote down that I thought were important to talk about were like the one I just said, most recently on that 3rd and 10 where they had a blatant false start by their left tackle. And it wasn't like it looked like he kind of moved or was making a call. He did the thing where he does a hard shift, tries to hide it and pause. Braylon Shelby's pointing at him, miss it. We don't call it, right? That's a free 5 right there where they should be back to 3rd and 15 and then 4th and 15 instead of having another 3rd and 10 opportunity and then making, the conversion on 4th and 10. I thought that was an absolute terrible roughing the passer call on Anthony Lucas when he came around the corner and he fell. Looked like he literally fell. Like his ankle, looked like his ankle got rolled up on. He goes down. He actively tries to avoid Drew Aller, right? And Statutor gets on and says, hey, it has to be forcible contact. It has to look like he's, going after his legs forcibly, on purpose, with intention. He is trying to avoid him, right? And then Statutor gets on, the rules expert, and says, I hate that call. I wish we didn't call it. Then a couple plays later, we go to overtime, right? And those are the two big argumentative calls that I think everyone was talking about on a national media standpoint. That first pass interference to Mekhi Lemon, or the first no call that everyone was saying was pass interference, that one was a little bit more of a perception call, in my opinion. I don't think that was super obvious. He did have two hands on Mekhi, but there's a lot of times when you watch other film or other games where you're going to see some hand fighting. You're going to see a guy maybe not grab, but have his hands on him. Is it a penalty? Can you call it? Yes. Can you also not call it? I can see the argument for both. I try to take my bias out of it. So I wasn't as mad about that one, especially because Mekhi still won on the route and got behind him. And then Miller obviously threw that one out of bounds. So that's tough when we had a play to make there and Mekhi got behind him and beat him on the route. Now, the second one, though, to Jacoby Lane, I just don't see how you don't call that a pass interference. It wasn't like it was a bang-bang play. Right on some of those where they're getting ready to catch it, the defender hits him right, millisecond right before he catches it, and it's a bang-bang. Maybe he got there early, but in full speed, it's tough to tell from a referee's point of view. And then you go back and watch the replay, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that was PI. That one was just as obvious on the field in real time as it was on the replay in slow motion. That defender got to Jacoby a full second before the ball even got there. He absolutely hindered his opportunity to make a play on the football. He disrupted his hands, his arms to go catch the ball on a crucial 3rd down. That should have been a pass interference, a new set of downs, a first down for us. And now we're not having Michael Lance have to kick a 45-plus yard field goal or 40-yard-plus field goal, whatever it was, in overtime. We should have a 1st and 10 off of that PI. That one was very frustrating for me. There were other calls. I'm not going to get into them. Obviously, everyone's talking about it on Twitter. You can leave your comments, down below on this video. Some other ones that you maybe saw, but those are ones to me because they, fans brought it up and those questions and people talked about it. And, it's important, I think, to bring it up. I don't want to act like it didn't happen. But again, this isn't me blaming the officials on that. But that's, again, like I've talked about before, to where they don't determine the outcome of a football game, but they dictate the momentum and they dictate, how the rest of the game goes. And that was very evident, especially in overtime on that huge missed call to Jacoby Lane on 3rd down.
Jay said, with all the bad no calls every week, how do you keep a young team motivated?
That's just one of those things where you control what you can control, right? That's the message to the football team. Look, we can't control what the referees are going to call, but we can control how we react to it. And we can control how we play on the field. And there's times where it feels like, okay, well, you're trying to control how you play, and you're still getting no calls, or you're getting calls that maybe aren't a penalty that are affecting this football game. You're getting 15-yarders on a roughing the passer that shouldn't even happen in the first place. You're getting no calls in overtime on a PI, that should have been called. So there's so many things that can disrupt or like I said, dictate the outcome of a football game. But overall, you have to block all that out, because if you harp too much on that or you focus too much on that, you lose focus. Now your mind's, more so paying attention to the ref than you are, what's happening on the field or making the next big play. And then you're thinking too much, and now you miss those opportunities. So biggest thing for me is just control what you can control. You got to block that out. You can never dictate what the refs are going to do. You can play smart, play within the rules. If something happens as a quarterback or as a captain or one of your leaders can walk over, say, hey, ref, he's holding me all game. Can you look at this? Or, hey, ref, that's a PI on that one. Can you pay a little bit more attention to him? You can have a conversation with them and talk to him about it. Or if you're a coach, you can get a little more frustrated and get in their face and let them do the yelling. But as a player, be smart, though. Don't get a 15-yarder. Don't get a free 15 because of a missed call. But as a player, you just control what you can control. You move on. You focus on the next step, and you go out there and make some plays.
We got a statement from Zach that I did not fact check, disclaimer, but he does say, just want to say that we have not had an opponent called for a holding in the last 141 carries.
Wow. Yeah, we didn't fact check it, so I don't know if that's true as well. I'm taking his word for it. Just, again, disclaimer, we are not saying that's true, but I'm going to go ahead.
He said it before, and I have fact checked it before, and it has been correct, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there.
Well, I'm trying to think. So I know that Michigan, and I talked about this on our recap episode, they had 47 rush attempts without one holding call, which is unbelievable. I do not think Minnesota got a holding call in that football game either. Now that I'm flashing back, I know their first penalty, I don't even think was until like 12 minutes ago in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Against us, Penn State, I'm trying to think yesterday. So if they didn't have a holding call, I don't remember any. But yeah, that is a crazy stat, especially with how many times teams are running the football against us. When you have those combo blocks, when you have those down blocks, when you have pullers working up to the second level, when you have reach blocks, when you're trying to get to the outside and cut off a defender, that you're telling me there's not one holding call on all those rush attempts. I mean, that's just, it's hard to believe. But again, I don't want to blame the refs. I mean, that's if that's true, then that's unbelievable. And we've seen some officiating be questionable over the last couple of games and not go our way, and it absolutely has affected the momentum and ultimately the outcome of these football games. And it's just something, again, like I said, I don't want to harp on it, but it's just frustrating. And it's tough because you see some of these that aren't questionable calls. There's some that are blatantly obvious, and they are just getting missed for whatever reason. And it's really affecting, the players. And I hate it most for the players on the field.
Yeah.
Right. I know Coach Riley's going to get mad. I know the coaching staff's going to send it into the Big Ten and have them look at it and review it and all that. But it really sucks for the players on the field that put in those blood, sweat, and tears and all the time in the offseason and work their tails off, in the weight room and on the football field and on the practice field at Howard Jones. And then, things happen on Saturday out of their control after all the hard work they put in because of a missed call. And now it, dictates the outcome of a football game. That's just the most frustrating part for me as a former player that makes me mad. But at the end of the day, you got to block it out, control what you can control. It's probably not going to change. It may keep happening this year. There's going to be some other calls that are going to get missed. There's going to be some other calls that are made against us that maybe aren't true or that are, not penalties. But we've got to block all that out and go out there and continue to perform and play hard and try to work through it.
I'm going to combine two questions. Antonio says, call me delusional, but I felt like this was our best played / best coached game of the season against a top 5 opponent. Are we just the unluckiest team in the country right now? ? 2 question marks, actually. And then a listener from Corona, they texted in, so I didn't get their name. They said, do we always find a way to lose, or is it just bad luck?
Yeah, I will say this. This is kind of how I opened the show. I am very proud of the way that our guys played this football game. I'm very proud of the heart that they showed. It made you proud to be a Trojan. Obviously, we wish the outcome was different. It was a great day in the Coliseum. I stayed for the first half. I stayed through halftime. You could feel the energy in the Collie. It was loud. I wish we would fill it up a little bit more. I wish it would be a little bit louder, and we could fill up some of those seats at the top and have it to where it's standing room only and have a true home field advantage. But we did a decent job, and I was proud of the energy in there, especially when we're playing well early on in that football game. And I'm just so proud of how our guys fought, and they played their tails off. We had some freshmen step up. We had some big time plays made in that game. We had some guys that you could tell were injured a little bit and getting carted off the field at halftime, but we're right back out there in the second half and putting their bodies on the line for the rest of their team and their brothers. But yeah, it's it's frustrating when you have 3 losses for a combined 13 points. It's just like, and we've talked about how small the margin for error is. And when those don't go your way, they start to stack up and you start to get a little defeated. And it's tough to stay positive and stay optimistic and get ready for the next game when you're 3-3 and you can easily be 6-0. And I hate to blame other things outside of that. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say it's on the players, it's on the coaches. And that's the first thing that Coach Riley and Miller Moss will tell you. And I'm talking as a former quarterback. We've got to find ways to not put ourselves in those situations at the end of the game, especially against Penn State when we had the lead, right? We played great in the first half. We were up 20-6 going into halftime. We're playing very good football, right? We feel very confident going into that second half. And then they come out and have 2 big-time drives, right? Then we stop them. We get an interception. Then we take it back into our control. We had opportunities to win that football game, right? And it's tough to say we're unlucky, or we're tough to say blame the refs and take it out of our hands, because outside of some of those missed calls or some of those plays they made, we had opportunities to win those games. Michigan, Minnesota is the same exact story. So I'm going to put it on the coaches and the players because I know they'll do the same thing. And that's the same thing I would do if I was playing, is say, hey, don't blame anything else. Blame me. I'm the quarterback of this team. I've got to get this fixed. So, yeah, I mean, there's some unlucky things that happen. There's some bad calls. There's some things that could have gone our way, could have gone either way, right? And we could easily be 6-0 right now, or even 5-1 in some of those games. That makes it so much more frustrating. But, it was, the positives are we're getting better. I truly believe we played one of our best games this year, and I feel very optimistic going forward. No, I don't care about, goals at the end of the year anymore. Let's block all that out. Playoffs, all that stuff's, I don't want to say it's 100% gone because we've never seen a 12-team playoff, so we don't know for sure. And a lot of teams are losing, and this year's been crazy.
Yeah.
But overall, we've got to block out all expectations, just focus on a week-to-week basis. I truly believe, despite the outcome of this game, I thought our football team on both sides of the football took a huge step forward on Saturday, and we've got to build off that momentum.
Rama says, how do you keep the team focused on turning the season around at this point?
Just next week, it really is. And I'm talking from a player's perspective. The season doesn't stop because, a game didn't go your way. The season doesn't stop because you've lost 3 already. Because you're 1-3 in conference play doesn't mean that you don't have 6 more to go. You've got to continue to play hard. You've got to continue to get better. And if the season feels like, okay, all our goals that we wanted at the beginning of the year, and again, I talked about expectations, but from a player, from a coach's standpoint, we want to go to the national championship. We want to win a Big Ten. We want to go to the playoff. All these things, if those don't feel attainable, then you make different goals. Then you focus on a week-to-week basis. Then you focus on getting better. Then you focus on developing some of these young guys. Then you focus on what's your mark going to be at USC if you're an older player and this is your last year. How am I going to leave a legacy? Even if I can't go win a national championship, I can still leave a legacy as a teammate. Personally, as a player, as a Trojan, how people are going to remember me. That's something that has to become important when you start, having some of these losses, when you get off to a 3-3 start, when you start struggling a little bit. I thought it was awesome. We had Sam Darnold on the pregame show for Trojan Tailgate Show. They started out 1-3 that year, and he wasn't even the starter to start the year. And then he takes over as a starter, and they go 1-3, and then they finish the season. I think they won 8 or 9 in a row, and they play in the Rose Bowl, and they beat Penn State in the Rose Bowl. And you never know. Maybe when when everything's going to click, when that turnaround happens, when that spark happens, and then you get hot, and then you go on a run, and then we break off 5 in a row, or 6 in a row, 7 in a row. So you never know, when that can happen. You just have to stay the course, keep working hard, keep the locker room tight. That has to be a huge point of emphasis. You can't have finger pointing. You can't have guys start falling out. You can't have guys yelling at one another, blaming one another. We have a great leadership core on this team, so I don't believe that will happen. But you've got to stick with your brothers. You got to keep working hard and just keep believing in one another. And I truly believe we are very close. I feel like I said, we could easily be 6-0, and I feel like we have a great core on this football team and a great leadership committee that can get things on the right track. And who knows, we could rattle off the next 6 in a row, and we'll see what happens. It may not be the playoffs, but we could play in a very good bowl game and build a ton of momentum going to the offseason. And you're continuously building. That's what college football is. If this year doesn't go how it wants to be, we're going to leave momentum and leave a legacy for years to come and build that up, and set a good foundation for the next couple of years here at USC.
On that note, we got a comment from Turtle who said, on to the next year. Let's hope Riley can bring in the right guys. And, look, I'm never going to tell someone how to be a fan. And trust me, I'm an Angels fan. I have dealt with many disappointing seasons. Please.
Yeah.
I will save that testimony for another episode. But I just think that, there's still so much left in the season, and we can tell this team is getting better. I know it's so hard to accept that after another excruciating loss, but this team is getting better. And to your point, Cody, there is still 6 games for this team to play, and that they will still play. And I feel like we wait all offseason for college football, and to just throw in the towel halfway through the season, to me, just feels like a missed opportunity as a fan. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to be a fan, but I just think that there's still more out there for this team in this season.
Yeah, we love a positive Keely. There we go. That's our kind of to bring us back to earth moment right there. Let her, the sky's not falling. There's still a lot to play for this season. There's still a lot to learn from this season. I will say this though, and I will give some perspective as a fan and where I think that he's coming from, or a lot of fans are coming from. I think the frustrating part is to have all these expectations in the season or in the off season and build up all this suspense and build up all this optimism and feel great about this football team and feel like the sky's the limit and feel like it's our year, right? Everyone says that it's our year. And at USC, you need to feel that every single year that it's our year. You have to feel like we have a championship caliber football team every single year because we are a blue blood. When it comes to college football, we are one of the known brands. We have 11 national championships. We have 8 Heisman Trophy winners. This is a school that is built on greatness, and you expect greatness year in and year out. I think the frustrating part for fans is when it starts to go downhill, or not go downhill, but when it's not as good as it should be early on, right? If we are 6-0, 7-0, and we start, losing some of these later games, we start struggling a little bit towards the end of the season, I think it's like, okay, we saw the flashes of how good we can be. We saw where we can build up. We saw we can get better at some of these areas. And then it starts to, get a little frustrating towards the end. We've got to learn to finish. But when it's early on like this and you start out 1-3 in conference play, and again, I'm not saying I feel this way. I'm just saying I understand from a fan's point of view. And Keely mentioned being an Angels fan. It's just frustrating when it's this early in the year and it already feels like we're out of contention. And it already feels like we have no chance for the playoffs and we have no chance to play for a Big Ten championship. And we have no chance for some of these goals that we, set our sights on for so long, for 6 months in the offseason. I think that's where the frustrating part comes in. But now from the player's perspective, from a true diehard SC fan, from a, let's get all the emotions out, say it all on Twitter. But then after the loss, after the 24-hour rule, let's put it all back in perspective. Let's support these guys on this team. Let's show support to them. Let's show recruits and players that want to come here and players that want to be USC Trojans to show that we don't give up on our guys no matter what happens. We're going to stick with them through thick and thin. Let's stay optimistic. Let's stay positive. Let's support these guys. I'm going to do that. I know all the true fans out there are going to do that. They're going to support this football team. They're going to support Coach Riley and his staff. We're going to keep believing in this football team and learn that even if our expectations that we wanted from the beginning of the year aren't there and they're not attainable anymore, there still is a lot to play for. There's still a lot to learn from. There's still a lot to improve on that can make us better. Like I said, not only for this year, and I'm not looking ahead, but that's what happens when you're in the media. You focus not only on this year, but you've got to build foundation and recruiting in years to come. And some of these younger players, there's still so much positive that can come from this season. Even with a 3-3 start and a 1-3 start in conference play, that it's just, I can never imagine myself as a fan or some of the true SC fans already giving up on this football team and looking ahead to the following year.
And if I didn't already know that this game was a tough one to process emotionally for USC fans, I would be able to tell by our comment section or our question section, solely because our regulars, Cody, didn't even have questions. Joe Osorio just put a sad face and said,
was that Joe? I saw that.
Hashtag FTFO, if you know what that stands for. Ramirez said only pain with a crying emoji. And Sacramento Pete said, no questions, proud of the men of Troy. They worked their tails off this season. I hope they can continue the hard work and ignore the outside voices, he says.
Yeah, I love that, Pete. And look, that's the correct response, in my opinion. I did the same thing. I literally just tweeted pain, ... and then I put fight on, right? Because it's always fight on. It's still fight on no matter what. It doesn't matter who's the coach, who the players are, what it looks like, who's here, who's our quarterback, who's our receiver, who's our safety. I'm always going to believe in USC football. I'm always going to be a fan. I'm always going to bleed Cardinal and gold. I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this program. I put everything I had into this program. I got here through the sanctions, through missing scholarship players. We had 30 less scholarship players than we should have when I was playing here. We missed bowl games. I got to learn from Matt Barkley when he went through that as well. And then I had 5 head coaching changes my time here, and I still stuck with the program. And I love to believe, and I truly mean that, if the transfer portal was a thing, I would have stayed as well, right? And I know, there's a lot of USC former players that get on Twitter that are very frustrated, that make these comments that go off on some of this. And it's not because they hate the program. It's not because they hate the product on the field. It's not because they don't like the players or the coaches. They just care. And we all care, right? That's why that's what brings us all together, is we love USC football. So again, and I don't want this to get me on, Cody's on here being our therapist again, or telling us how we should feel after a loss, or, how we should react. I'm just trying to put it in perspective a little bit of, I understand it hurts. I understand it's frustrating. I understand that there's a lot of emotions that go into that game, especially when you lose and you feel drained, even though you didn't play in the game. But overall, keep supporting these guys. These players put so much work into it. And I promise you, no one wants to win as much as the players on the field and as much as the coaching staff that they have here. So let's just keep supporting them, believe in them. Obviously look at the positive. We can learn from the negatives. You can be frustrated. I completely agree. I'm frustrated. That one hurt. It hurt very bad. But again, a lot of positives to take from this game. And I think there's a lot of things that we improved on that gives you a lot of hope going forward this season.
You mentioned your playing days, Cody, in your previous answer. And it's funny because it's a perfect segue into this question we have. It's from Steve, who said, I attended the game in South Bend in 2013. It was a defensive struggle. And as I recall, Ed O had taken over as interim coach. Indy was favored, I believe, and we had the ball with time left on the clock. Cody scrambled for a big gain down maybe to the 5-yard line as time was running out. We could have won the game with a touchdown, which seemed likely, but his heroic scramble was called back due to a holding penalty. Ask him about the game and his feeling when he called that penalty. Heartbreak, but I believe we went on a 5 or 6 game run following that loss. And I know this is probably a sore subject for you, Cody.
No, you know what? I love the ending right there, Steve. You brought it back together with the positive, with the run we went on. And I flash back to that game. You remember the feeling in the locker room, remember the smell of South Bend, being in that stadium, being on the grass and the lights and the night game and that atmosphere. And it's frustrating. Those losses are tough. And that's kind of like Penn State game yesterday, right? But that game against Notre Dame, it was a back and forth. We had some missed opportunities in that game. The play you're talking about was we had a 2-minute drive going to win it there at the end. Had a huge play to Darius Rogers on the sideline and set us up in a great spot. Then I scrambled, I think down to, I think he said the 5. I think it was like the 2 or 3 yard line, getting ready to punch it in. We would have won that game, and we got a holding call on our right tackle that, in my opinion, was not a holding call, right? And I always say I don't blame the refs, but here I am talking about one of my losses that, and you watch the film back.
You did qualify it, though. You're like, in my opinion. So you still were very professional about it. I'll give you that.
Well, I'm a little, I tell everyone to take it easy, but then you tell me about my games, I start getting a little fired up here.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, no, and I'll go back to the positive. But yeah, we ended up losing that game, got that called back, and then that took us out of field goal range. It took us out an opportunity of making a play to win the game. But yeah, that year was awesome because I learned so much about our team. And that was the year, too. We started 3-2, right? Coach Kiffin had just gotten fired. Ed Ogeron takes over, and I think we go 6-2 under Coach Ho, or 5-2 or something. We won every game except for that Notre Dame and UCLA, right? The 2 games that you want to win. Those are 2 games that we ended up losing. But other than that, we won an unbelievable run. We ended up beating Fresno State in the bowl game when they had Derek Carr, when they had Devontae Adams. They had a very good football team. They had that huge run that year. We go out there with, a ton of question marks, ton of injuries. I think our 4th or 5th string center at the time, a lot of backup players because of injuries. A lot of guys, that didn't start the year or didn't play as starters to begin the year, but ended up having to, earn their right and play under Coach O and all that. And then Coach O gets let go for the bowl game. And Coach Helton takes over, and it was just adversity after adversity after adversity. And we found a way to still come together, win 10 games that year, and go on a great run. And then that set us up for the following year, right? The junior year, or my junior year, come out and played well that year. It did a lot of things well. We had a couple heartbreaking losses. Well, we had the Hail Mary against Arizona State, and then we had that last play of the game against Utah, or else we won 11 games that year. So I'm getting off topic again, but that happens so many times where you have those heartbreaking losses and you learn so much about your team. And then the following year, my senior year, we ended up winning the Pac-12 South, which was awesome. And it had some more adversity and had our head coach get let go. And I flash back, just so many things happen. But when you have these tough moments and you have, games like that, I truly believe as much as we want to win them, as much as fans, you want to be on the winning side, you want to have bragging rights, you want to be able to feel confident, feel great about it, and all the good things that you saw from that game don't get overshadowed by the loss. But I truly believe it really builds character for this football team. And like I said, expectations aside from this year, it sets a good foundation and a belief system, and it brings the guys closer together, and they handle adversity and they learn from it. And I think it's going to help them going forward. But that was cool, Steve. Thanks for taking me down memory lane. That was a tough one to remember against Notre Dame. The following year, though, I threw 6 touchdowns against them, so that will be a positive. And we ended up beating them 49-14 at home in the Coliseum. So that was a great bounce back year. And I'd like to truly believe it was because of us losing that game and learning from it and coming back and, getting them the following year.
How hard is it, though, in that moment to then, as a locker room, still stick together and whatnot after the Notre Dame loss?
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard in the sense of we had a lot of great leadership on that football team. We had a great foundation on that football team. We had a lot of guys that were just Trojans through and through, right? And I just flash back to some of those moments when, Coach Kiffin got let go and everyone kind of looked around like, what do we do? And that was my first year starting. I was a sophomore. I was a young player, and I had to, step up and be a leader early on in those moments. You're the quarterback of the team. It doesn't matter if you're a freshman, you're a senior, you're a sophomore like I was. You've got to step up and lead. But I had great leaders around me, like Hayes Pillard, like Deion Bailey, like Devon Kennard. We had Marcus Martin was my center. We got along so well. We played so well together. We had some very good Silas Red, who I just saw at the Penn State game. One of my good friends was the running back alongside of me, a veteran, a guy that made me, feel a lot more comfortable back there as a quarterback. So you lean on those guys in those moments, like we have on this football team, like the Miller Mosses, like the Mason Cobbs, like Eric Gentry. Even though he's been hurt, he's still a part of this team. He's still around the guys in the locker room. Woody Marks, a guy who's been through a lot, who's played at the highest level for a long time. Jonah Monheim, guys that are leaders on this team that you stick together and you learn from, and that helps you to go on those runs. And I said that before. We could be, that one win, that one spark game away to getting hot. Who says we don't rattle off the next 6 and go undefeated, through the rest of October and then through November, right? And then we get to play in a great bowl game. Do we make the playoffs? Who cares at this point? I don't know. I don't know if that's still possible. It's the first year of the 12-team playoff, but we can get hot at the right time, build a ton of momentum, and it makes you feel a lot better about all the hard times we went through this year. And you really feel like we learned from it. We applied it to this season, and it's going to be great for us for years to come. And a lot of guys that are younger guys on this team can learn from the the older guys on this team and the vets and the leaders.
We already answered something adjacent to Louis' question, but I do still want to give him a shout out because he said, still looking forward to going to my first USC game in Maryland this weekend. Fight on. I think it's just so fun when I find out that people who ask questions all the time on our show, Cody, have never been to a USC game. I'm like, oh my gosh. So have fun, Louis. If you see me, please say hi. I will be there. And then I'm going to end it, Cody, with a question from Mr. Ashcraft, who said, what's your go-to/best coping mechanism after a USC loss? Apparently it's being sleepless, Cody.
Yeah. Staying up all night and watching golf videos to try to take my mind off of it.
Golf? No, oh my gosh.
Yeah, just anything but. No, I'm a nerd. I'm a football junkie. I love the sport, and it's crazy. I just have to watch the film again. That's what I do. I watch the game multiple times. I go back and take notes, even though I don't play anymore. I do broadcasting now, so I have an excuse for it. But yeah, after a loss, especially when I was playing, as soon as that game ended, they would send the games to our iPads or to, your computer, to your laptop, whatever you had. You can get it. You can download the app. Or I would go back to the on campus, go into the McKay Center, go up top and watch film. That was just, after those losses, the first thing I always want to do, and I still do it now. I can't help it. I want to move on, but the first thing I want to do is go back and watch film. And I also love to compare my notes, right? I take notes now while the game happens. I love to go back and watch it and confirm some of those, or maybe I see something the second time that I didn't see the first. But yeah, it's weird. I know it's weird. Like I said, I played football for 20 years of my life, ever since I was a little kid all the way, and played, in the NFL. So my coping mechanism is to go back and make those corrections and watch the film immediately. And I know it sounds like torture to some to have to relive it over and over after a loss, but it always worked for me. So that's what I like to do best. And now the second thing for me is to watch some YouTube golf videos at night and focus on my golf swing a little bit. That's my other way to get away from it.
That sounds like torture to me.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this. I'll say this too. It's the last question. My family, my wife's amazing. She's, amazing. She always, with anything I'm going through, she's always there for my dog, is amazing. But my wife went to Penn State, so it was hard to get a little comfort from her. But
Rama
I will say,
did ask,
I got to give her credit.
How did that go? In the Kessler Bowl.
She was rooting for SC. She was rooting for me. I won't say SC. She was rooting for me. She wanted us to have a good week doing the podcast. And, wanted to win. wanted everyone to feel good. But I could tell there was a little side smirk because she's a Nittany Lion alum. So she's got bragging rights for a whole year. So that one was a little personal. But yeah, that's another layer to help out. Maybe not just maybe not this week because she's a Penn State alum.
Speaking of your parents, just want to give a shout out to them. I got to see them before the game. That was super fun. Got to actually say hi to them after reading their questions for a couple of years. I can't remember the last time I saw them. I think I saw them briefly 2 years ago. So it was fun to see them again.
Yeah, they've come to a couple games. I think the Notre Dame game 2 years ago, they got to come down on the field. But I got to get them field pass for this game, so that was really cool. But yeah, they got to be there, watch the show, and watch the Trojan Tailgate show, which we got another one this week. We just talked about our Baltimore fan. I'm going to the wrap-up segment because I'm assuming we're out of questions, right?
We are. Wrap it up, but Cody, go for it.
It is late. We've got Trojans Live tomorrow. Make sure you tune in. Get to hear from Lincoln Riley. Get to hear from Jalen Smith and a couple other people on that show. We got our preview episode coming up. It's a new week. Turn the page. 24-hour rule's over. After you watch this episode, flush it. Put it all behind you. We learn from it. We watch the tape. We correct the mistakes. And we move on. We do the same thing here at the Victory Pod. I love you guys. Fight on. Stick with us through thick and thin. Stick with this team. Stick with this coaching staff. We're all Trojans. We all bleed Cardinal gold. We truly love USC football. Don't give up on these guys just yet. Support them. They put all the hard work in this offseason. They deserve it from us. I truly believe they're going to get this thing turned around, and they're going to play very good the rest of this season and give us a lot to root for. So That being said, fight on. Love you guys. I am out, and we will see you on Wednesday, Thursday, whenever the episode comes out.
Usually on a
but I am
Thursday,
done.
yes.
Oh, wait. We got the Coda. Come here. Come over here.
Do you actually have a treat this time? Are you
I
not
do have a
torturing
treat.
your
Come on,
dog?
buddy.
Okay.
Because last time I didn't give him one. Hold on, Daddy's got two. Come here.
Coda appearance of
Coda is
the
the
week.
fight on. Okay. All right. And I am done. Coda's
Alrighty.
out. Fight on. Keely, wrap us up.
Alrighty, thank you so much for another great pod, Cody. Appreciate all the hard work you do. But like the man said, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. That's Cody. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next time.